Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to this subject overview in Scrutiny Committee 3 meeting, which due to health and safety reasons currently being followed in Magen County Borough Council will be held virtually with everyone accessing the meeting from remote locations. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed subsequently. Should I, as Chair, experience any technical difficulties during the meeting, Councillor Colin Davis will step in and take over temporarily as Chair in my absence, and in his absence, then Councillor Graham Walter will step in. Please can everyone ensure that their mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda, and I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your camera and microphone switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference. If any member or officer wishes to raise a point or question, they should click the raise hands icon at the top right hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I will come to you in the order I receive requests. Please lower your hand once you have finished speaking. The instant messaging chat button has been disabled for this meeting. Please do not use your microphones until I invite you to do so. I will ask officers to introduce themselves when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. I will now proceed to the agenda. Apologies for absence. I have a few apologies. I have Mel Evans, Nero Farr, Mike Kern. Any more declarations?
Councillor Farr is in the meeting, I believe, Chair.
Okay, right. Okay, good.
But no, there are no other apologies.
No other apologies. Okay. Declarations of interest. If any member has
Mr. Chair, I have got my hand up.
Oh, sorry. The problem I've got, Martin, is it is Martin. Was it Councillor?
No, don't you dare.
I've got the spiel open, and I haven't got the. I can't see who's raising their hands while I'm reading that out. Unfortunately, that's the difficulty I got here. Because I'm going on the screen. If I had two screens, it'd be different, I suppose. But go ahead anyway.
That's perfectly understandable, Mr. Chair. I understand that.
Yeah.
You've read out a declaration at the start of this meeting, and it goes through, and I support fully a lineage of should any technical difficulties arise. But you read out two councillors' names that would follow you if in the interest. Yes. Can I ask when that was agreed, please?
It was agreed over the last 6 weeks. There was the initial agreement was for somebody else, Mike Kern, and he couldn't do it. The reason is they're all Labour, if that's what you were concerned about, is because the chair is Labour, I think. Councillor Bledsoe it is, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Yeah. I was contacted by Merrill and asked who would stand in. We asked initially Mike Kern and whoever the other one is, I can't remember now. And
I think it was Councillor Davis and then Councillor Walters, yeah. Yeah,
it just went down that they just asked whoever was available basically to do it. Basically, that was it. It took several weeks to get sorted out, to be honest. So that's okay.
You want me to expand on that, Chair, at all?
Yes, go on, carry on, yeah. Councillor Bliss was frozen, I think.
Just to clarify, yeah, it was an informal process. Just they're not official vice chairs. It's not an official vice chair capacity. There's no official appointment in terms of that because the Constitution doesn't require vice chairs for scrutiny. We haven't got this in place. It's literally an informal agreement just because of Teams and the way it sometimes is, and you can have numerous technical difficulties. So it's literally a temporary stepping in. If something happened, like a Teams dropped out for the chair. If there was to be a vice chair appointment, for example, if Councillor Davis couldn't attend, that would be an official appointment that would have to be made at the committee meeting before we started the agenda. So that would be officially done by the committee.
That's right.
Thank you very much. That's very clear, and I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Thank you. Wait, where were we now? Declarations of interest, was it, I believe? Any declarations of interest?
Yeah, as I said, the last pre-meeting, I'm involved in the SPF bid in the Vale and particularly around Celt. Okay.
Yeah, okay. I've got Councillor, I'm looking at the screen now. Councillor Ian Williams, have you got your hand up?
Yes, Chair. I just
Go
want
ahead.
to, I just want to declare interest that I'm a Bridgend Town Councillor, so anything relating to the town with far as regeneration, with regard to the funding, I would like to declare an interest.
Do you have to declare interest for that, Ian? I'm not sure what you do.
I'm
to be
not sure.
honest.
I'd
No,
rather be
Richard, could you
overcautious than
clarify?
undercautious.
Would Ian need to declare an interest in that?
It's entirely personal choice. If he feels better to declare it, then that's his
I
personal
would
choice. and it'll
rather
be
that
best.
just in case someone
Yeah.
puts it.
Yeah.
As one of our former advice used to be, it's better to over declare than under declare, Ian, isn't it? That's what they say, don't they?
Yes, indeed.
I got Nora Clark, Councillor Nora Clark, got a hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare prejudicial interest in item number 7 regarding the PRIF.
Okie dokie. I got no other hands raised, so I take it that's all the Declaration of Independence of interest, Chair. Right, let's go to the next one. Approval of the minutes. Please can I have a mover and a second of each set of minutes? Now, I don't know who was in that in these meetings, but this is the July meeting I'm referring to here, isn't it, Rachel? Yeah.
Chair, I think I'm the only person that is here that was sitting on that meeting.
When
So
I read
don't
it,
know.
we approved the previous ones, didn't we, from the last sort of council in that meeting, didn't we, in July, didn't we? So this is the one for the July meeting, I believe.
Yes, Chair, I believe this is the one for the
yeah.
July meeting.
So anyone can
So we're not, sorry, we're not doing the 16th of February then?
Those
No.
ones, they haven't come today, Councillor Clark, but they will be coming to a future meeting. For some reason,
Okay.
they've been omitted from this
Ooh.
agenda.
Oh.
And in terms of approving that, anyone can technically attend, anyone on the committee can technically approve if you weren't actually in the meeting, because you have a duty to approve the minutes of the previous committee.
Right.
So have I got a mover?
I think Councillor Williams has got his hand up.
Councillor Ian Williams?
That's a legacy hand, sorry.
Legacy hand. Councillor Clark,
So-
is that a legacy hand?
Well, are we doing the 18th of July
Yes.
now?
Yes, that's right, correct, yeah.
Right. Because I've got an alteration. Can I do that before they're approved or after?
Well, yeah, I believe you do that before, I believe, yeah. You've got an alteration, but then we can't approve them if they need to be altered after, I suppose, can't we?
Okay. If I could say then, Chair, at 5B, that
Yeah.
the correct wording for the PRIF
Yeah,
is Porthcawl Resort Investment Focus, not Porthcawl Resort Investment Forecast. It's focus, not forecast.
yeah, okay, I'm sure that's been changed for you, Nora, thank you.
Thank
Are you happy to move the minutes, Nora, after that?
I am.
Yeah, have we got a seconder? Anybody?
A
I'll
2nd, Chair, Councillor Colin Davis.
Yeah, thank you very much, Colin. There we are. Go back to the pack. Where are we? Lost my. Sorry, guys, I've lost my place now. Move the minutes, right. Okay, item 4, the Shared Prosperity Fund. I will ask the Corporate Director of Communities, Mr. Janine Nightingale, to present the report. Janine, are you on the call?
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Would you present the report when you're ready, please?
Yes, of course, not a problem at all.
Thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. And for the purposes of the recording, I'm Janine Nightingale, the Corporate Director for Communities. So this afternoon, I'm joined by one of my key officers, Ian Sherwood, and Ian and his team, along with other officers in the Communities Directorate, have worked tirelessly, to be fair, over the last 5 to 6 months, putting together what is a very, very good Shared Prosperity Fund bid that we took to Cabinet earlier on in this year. But what I would like to do today, if I may, Chair, is just point out a few pertinent points, first of all, about the Shared Prosperity Fund, and then I'm going to hand over to Ian to take us through some of the detail within the report, and then I'm very comfortable to take questions if everybody's comfortable with that. Chair, I can see you're on another call, so shall I just continue or wait? Chair, you're on mute, I believe.
Yeah, I got Councillor Jenkins on the phone to me. He can't get into the meeting. Oh, that's why I put myself on mute. Sorry about that. Councillor Phil Jenkins can't get in. He said he clicked on the icon. It's not working. So I don't know what we
I'll
can
do
do.
something, Council. I'll do something, Chair. I'll get in contact. Thank you.
Yeah, they're going to contact IT if you feel that's all we can do, right? Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks. Ta-ra, Phil. Ta-ra. 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 He rang me in the middle. I could see it was in, so I had to answer it. You know. Okay. Sorry, Ginny.
No, don't worry, Chair. So what I was just explaining is I'll give a general introduction,
Yeah.
and then I'm going to hand over to Ian Sherwood to take you through a little bit more detail in the report. And then, of course, we're happy to take questions on the report itself. So just as a bit of a summary then, what it's all about. So the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, UK SPF, is a UK government replacement for the European structural funds. So when the EU ended, this was UK's government's way of having funds so that enable us to use them to apply to boost up our economy, and it's also a key part of the government's levelling up agenda. Now we're going to talk about the levelling up funds, the next item on the agenda, but this Shared Prosperity Fund is part of that package of funding the UK government has put together. So the Shared Prosperity Fund itself is about building pride and place and increasing life chances in areas. That's the raison d'etre for it. And there's three main priorities to the Prosperity Fund that we have to tick when we put our activities into place in order to be successful with the funding. That's about creating a sense of communities in place, supporting local businesses, and importantly, looking at people and skills and making sure that our people have the right skills to move on in the future. And I'm not going to go into those in too much detail because I know Ian will be able to expand on all of that for you. Now, Bridgen's allocation to date at the moment is £23 million, and it has to be spent over 3 years. Now, this, I'm afraid, sounds a nice sum of money and quite a lot to spend in 3 years, but it's about half of what we're used to receiving from the EU. We used to get considerably more from the EU. So it has been a real challenge putting this investment plan together because literally it's half of what we're used to having. Now, the Shared Prosperity Fund, one more thing I need you to understand, it's for all of Bridgend County, not just BCBC. So that 23 million is for initiatives all over the county. So we've worked with third sectors and colleges, etc., to put the plan together. And we should have a decision on the plan. We submitted it a couple of months ago. We should have a decision on the plan and on the 23 million by mid-October. So it won't be long now, next couple of weeks, and we'll know. So it was approved by Cabinet in July for us to submit that plan. It was a regional plan. We submitted it as 10 local authorities, and now it's here with you for some scrutiny. So, Chair, that's just a very high level what it's about, setting the scene. And if I may now, I'm going to invite Ian Sherwood in, one of my group managers, who was instrumental to driving this bid forward. And I'm going to ask him to add any detail that he feels could be useful for scrutiny, and then we can take some questions. So I'll hand over to Ian.
Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Chair. For purposes of the recording, Ian Sherwood, Group Manager, Economy, Natural Resources and Sustainability. Chair, as Janine suggested, if you're willing, I'll go through the salient points and then leave questions till the end, if that's okay. Yeah.
That's
okay,
fine.
thank you. Thank you, Chair. So I will, like I say, go through the salient points. So the purpose of the report really is to provide an update to the Scrutiny Committee on our work on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and also a slight overview through Appendix 1 on the proposals that may go forward. So if we take a step back for a moment, so following the withdrawal of the UK from the European Union, the Shared Prosperity Fund has become essentially a key part of the government's what was the levelling up agenda, alongside the Levelling Up Fund itself and the Community Ownership Fund. Janine's spoken a little bit about the primary aim being to build pride in place and increase life chances, and has touched on already the 3 investment priorities within the prospectus, that of communities in place, supporting local business, and people and skills. I should add as well, alongside the people and skills priority, there's a dedicated resource specifically for a UK-wide intervention called Multiply, which seeks to improve adult numeracy skills. So within our region, local authorities were invited to collaborate and to feed into one overall local investment plan for the area. That was to set out then the suite of proposals across the area for delivery of the funding up until March 2025. And as Janine said already, that was agreed by Cabinet last July. As part of that agreement, Cabinet also agreed that Rhondda and Taff would assume the role of the lead local authority for the region for Shared Prosperity Fund. What essentially that means in layperson's terms is that UK Gov will have one funding agreement direct to Rhondda and Taff County Borough Council, and then they will have back-to-back agreements out to each of the other 9 authorities within the region. So each local authority area has flexibility as to how it delivers Shared Prosperity Fund, and within the guidance from UK Gov, there's a mixture of options there. So there's options for grant funding, there's options for procurement, commissioning, as well as in-house provision. So whilst we as an authority were not required to develop our own investment plan, we did feel it was important to develop, if you like, the information you can see at Appendix 1, which sets out our priorities about what we feel at this stage in time, based on the information available, to be the best deployment of the Shared Prosperity Fund monies. Appendix 1 itself was developed following a series of rather breakneck speed workshops with officers from across all the directorates within the council. And the draft set of proposals was put forward to Cabinet. Those proposals prior to that were discussed with our economic partnership at a series of meetings, and also the Public Service Board. What I should add as well, Chair and Councillors, the process that led to that work fundamentally was based on existing and recent council plans and strategies. So there's a firm evidence base and strategic alignment to what is being proposed. In section 4.6 of the report, you can then see how those proposals align with, if you like, the grouped headings that were put forward by Rhondda and Taff. So the plan itself for the region went in to UK Gov on the 1st of August, and as Janine said, we're anticipating approval any point during October, but around the middle of October seems the most likely. And then we have until March 2025 to spend the funding. One thing I think it's important to stress, though, Chair and Councillors, is that at this point, these proposals were developed in the absence of detailed fund guidance from UK Gov, and as such, that classic phrase, subject to change, is important here, particularly as some of the proposed activities, delivery models and funding values may flex and may vary. Now, should UK Gov approve the regional investment plan, then as I've mentioned, RCT will have a single funding agreement with them for the allocation for the region of 278.5 or thereabouts million. RCT will then be accountable for all aspects of monitoring and claiming, and then the back-to-back agreements will flow down to the local authority, in our case, for our allocation. Process for taking all that forward is outlined in section 4.10 of the report. So as we look to move into delivery, we've agreed with Cabinet a 2-tier governance structure. So you have the economic partnership, which draws in partners, multi-sector partners from across the county and wider within the region in Wales. And internally then we have an economic programme board. Given that the majority of the funds seek to address economic development challenges, it was agreed that those would be the most suitable avenues really with which to govern and oversee the programme. Alongside this, then, of course, close liaison with the Public Service Board and the agenda and the wellbeing plan there. So turning to financial matters in the report, the way it worked was that all areas in the UK were given a conditional allocation of funding to cover the period up to March 2025. In section 8.2 2, you can see how that breaks down for Bridgend. Now, I will sort of talk through this because I think it's important to understand how it's made up. So whilst we have an overall allocation of 23 million, in the initial figures from UK Gov, 3.99 of that was specifically allocated to the Multiply programme I mentioned earlier, which left then 19.1 million there or thereabouts for what was considered as core Shared Prosperity Fund activity under those 3 themes that I mentioned. Some further points to note then, Chair, Councillors, in relation to funding matters. So guidance from UK Gov currently suggests that funding is broken down to fixed annual yearly allocations. So that roughly equates to 12% in year 1, 24 in year 2 and 64 in year 3. For Multiply then, the allocations are different. In year 1, i.e. this year, 30%, 35 in year 2 and 35 in year 3. Now, of course, I'm sure all councillors and Chair, you can appreciate the challenges that creates, not only in year 1 when you receive an offer letter of funding well into the financial year. Unfortunately, there's currently no indication that funding can be rolled forward or that we're going to see multi-annual allocations for this fund, but that is something through the WLGA we are lobbying very hard on. But sadly, it may be a case of, in layperson's terms, use it or lose it. We are exploring mechanisms with other local authorities in the region and UK Gov about how we can develop some flexibility around this. Another point to note is that up to 4% of those allocations that I've mentioned can be used for administrative purposes. So that's the financing, the legal aspects, you know, the claims, the monitoring reports and everything that sits behind delivering a £23 million programme. The current profile that I've set out in the report is inclusive of that 4%. It's inclusive of Multiply and it's inclusive of an allocation from the Bridgend Shared Prosperity Fund for the delivery of a project by colleagues in Cardiff Capital Region. That, however, leaves us in the region of 2.5 million over profile. So in September, we in the Communities Directorate submitted a growth pressure as part of the 2023-2027 MTFS process to try and meet that shortfall in funding to ensure all the activities in Appendix 1 could be delivered as outlined. If, however, that growth pressure is not approved, the programme remains over allocated, then the responsibility for identifying those gaps will sit with the respective leads in each of the departments. So you recall earlier I said there's education proposals, there's wellbeing proposals, there's Communities Directorate proposals. If that isn't found, then ultimately the funding that will be available will only be the funding that's allocated, which is in section 8 of the report for Bridgend, specifically for Shared Prosperity Fund delivery, because we can't exceed obviously spending can't exceed the available budgets. So the recommendation of the report, Chair, is that Scrutiny note its comments along with Appendix 1, and as I mentioned at the beginning, myself and the team are on hand if there are any questions, and happy to address any comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that report. Anybody, any questions, please, to the director or to the officers? Raise your hands if you've got a question, please. Councillor Martin Williams, first out of the blocks, please.
Thank you, Chair. Let me just press the right buttons here. I'll take my hand down, or I'll leave it there. Yeah, I've got 3 questions that I had, and a fourth has sort of come up as the discussion's gone on. So if I might, Chair, I'll ask the 2 because that might invite other supplementaries. Then I'll come on in with the 3rd if that's okay. The first one, this top slice of 330,000 that's going to the CCRD. Why was that agreed then, and what's in it for us? We've already paid many millions into the CCRD, and it's a fairly controversial topic. So what's that actually funding, and why can't that be funded out of the millions we and our 9 other partner organisations or councils have already submitted? So that's my first question. And the second question, well, the second and a half question then is slightly touched on that this was rushed a little bit through brainstorming, through directorates and the rest of it. And the appendix, whilst is full of good intent, is perhaps a light on detail. So, for example, I draw your attention to the green or the net zero market. It's not really clear what that actually involves, and so where is the detail that underpins this bid? The other thing I'd like to ask, and I'll on this, and then I'll come back if that's okay, slightly different, is, and I've lost the governance picture now, but you've got the two-tier governance thing, and I think you had the partnership board. Forgive me if I didn't use quite the right terminology. A lot to do with place, a lot to do with communities accessing community or facilities and so on and so forth. No mention whatsoever of town and community councils in all of that. So what's their role in not only the governance, but their ability to help us deliver? And I've got a further question, but I'll leave it there for now. Chair, if you want to bring some other people in as well, and the answers, of course.
Okay. Are you going to answer now, Janine, or wait, or you'd rather answer now? Yeah, go on.
By all means, because we'll start the discussion now, if you don't mind, Chair. Councillor Williams. Yes, there is an element, a very small element actually, of 330,000 that is going to the city deal, the CCR, as a regional element of the shared prosperity bid. It was a percentage element that was agreed by all chief execs and leaders in the CCR programme board, because there is a recognition that whilst the Shared Prosperity Fund is about local needs and local delivery, there are some things that are better delivered regionally and without an artificial boundary of a county council. So what we have done is a small amount of the Shared Prosperity has been given up by each of the 10 local authorities, a proportional amount that is going into the CCR, and they're then going to deliver initiatives such as graduate schemes and regional training schemes, things that don't need to be locally based and have more impact regionally, because you'll be able to put more monies together. Now, the important thing here, as I said at the outset, is that this is a much smaller allocation than we're ever used to dealing with. We're used to having twice as much of this money from Europe. So there are things that we are, we won't cover all bases, we won't be able to, but we're going to have to prioritise what we cover. And so some of the things that the CCR are going to do is to look at filling some of those gaps. By bringing the amalgam of money together, they can then have an impactful regional programme as well. So it's a very small amount of our allocation, 330,000 and 23 million. It's a small part of the allocation, but we're hoping that we will deliver a very wide-reaching regional programme. They're still working on a number of ideas and suggestions which they're discussing with us, so we'll hopefully have a shared agreement of what that will be going forward. So hopefully that's answered question 1 for you. And then question 2, was this rushed? Well, to be quite frank, we were given a very tight timescale to do this work, probably tighter than we would have liked. However, it was a very detailed and thorough piece of work that was undertaken. The team spoke to lots of people in the third sector, all of the departments in the council has an input. In fact, there was a number of away days where staff went away together to look at what the priorities were, to have a collective agreement going forward, and to make sure that we had a very balanced bid as well, because that was really important, that we covered the priorities in all areas, to really get the best impact. And then, of course, not all of that detail of every individual scheme can be in the report, but let me assure you that the appendices is just an executive summary of those schemes, and all of those schemes then have detailed cases behind. And they have to, because as part of the Shared Prosperity bid, if people came forward to us and asked us for the detail of particular items, we have to have that detail. Now, if we had to put that detail into the bid would be 1,000 pages long, and so would the cabinet report. So of course, what you have is an executive summary, but please be assured there is a lot of detail, an awful lot of detail that sits behind this, and an evidence base, and rightly so, because this is £23 million of spending, so there's a detailed evidence base there. Now, with regard to governance, I might invite Ian in to answer that question. Because whilst I know we're having an economic programme board and there's going to be a regional programme board, I will ask Ian where TNCCs are going to, the Town and Community Council is going to play in, because I'm unsure about that, but I'm sure Ian can answer that question.
Yeah, thank you, Janine. There is a simple answer to that, actually, Councillor. The intention is that at the earliest opportunity, a presentation be given to the Town and Community Council Forum, and part of that presentation be specifically asking members of that forum how they themselves would see their engagement best suited in the delivery of the programme, because there's a number of different ways, and I think for some town councils the approach may be different to some community councils, so I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution. So the intention is to have that discussion through the forum.
Councillor Ian Williams, you got a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I noticed that Janine just said that, I'm trying to find what she said. It was a small amount paid in the top slice. But when you multiply that top slice by 10, and we are paying a proportionate amount, that's well over £3 million. It's an awful lot of money to deliver a deal. You know, when you said small element, Janine, but the other thing I wanted to get to, if we paid that proportionate amount, if it was a proportion of the contribution of a £334,000 top slice, on item 8.2, table 1, we get a percentage allocation, regional allocation of 8.3%. Our contribution to the Cardiff Capital Region deal is 9.4166%. So why are we being so short on that? We're over 1% down. I'm not happy about that. What's the reason for being 1% short on a large amount of money?
Councillor Williams, I think you're conflating the two things. The Shared Prosperity Fund is not CCR. The Shared Prosperity Fund, the Shared Prosperity Fund is UK government funding, and
Yes.
UK government have made that allocation to us. What you were talking about is our percentage that we pay into CCR itself, which is completely different. That's agreed with the regions. So the two things are different.
Okay.
UK government have given us the allocation, and we've chosen to work in a regional way. So the allocation of 23 million is from UK Gov. That's there. I mean, and as well, I have to be honest, we were slightly disappointed with that. We did think that we should have a higher allocation than that. I mean, one of the issues that we had and fought very hard about, there was what was called the precursor to the Strategic Shared Prosperity Fund, was the Community Infrastructure Fund, or CIF, I think it was called, that came in as a first grant amount before, precursor to Shared Prosperity Fund. Now, in that fund, Bridgend and Caerphilly weren't down as priorities. Our two councils didn't get any of that money in the first round, other than we could apply into authorities and we could represent authorities in our area. So we weren't recognised in the first round, and we knew that was a precursor to Shared Prosperity Fund. So what we did is there was a lobby. We lobbied, both Caerphilly and ourselves lobbied together to UK government and the MPs and said to them, we don't understand where you're going with this. It's very, very important that we get a good share of Shared Prosperity Fund. So when the Shared Prosperity Fund came through this time, we are recognised, Bridgend is recognised, but the percentage is much lower than we thought we would do to have. Caerphilly is in the 40 millions, we've got 23 million. I might be wrong, Caerphilly might be in the 30 millions. And I know that a Ian, because there's so many different amounts, will be able to tell you exactly where you are. But to come back to the issue, first of all, that you mentioned, you're conflating the two things. The UK Shared Prosperity Fund is from UK government.
I understand
and then CCR, the deal that we've done with the 10 authorities, is a different arrangement.
I'm just saying, if we are paying a proportionate amount into for a top slice, why is the proportion of the regional allocation 8.3%, when we pay in 9.4 to the CCRD, and also Rhondda Cynon Taf, who are administering this deal, are getting 16.2%. I just can't.
Councillor Williams, we are paying 8.2%, which is less than the allocation, which means we have to give less forward. So it's to the better, not to the detriment. They haven't taken 9% from us. They've taken 8% from us. But that's to the good, not to the bad.
I'm understanding that, but if we're talking about proportions, why are we only getting 8.3% of regional allocation when the administrating borough, Rhondda Cynon Taf, is getting 16.2%?
Well, I can't answer that, I'm afraid. That's what the UK government have allocated us. CCR have not made this allocation. UK government have. It's a UK government shared prosperity fund, and this is the allocation. Bearing in mind now, it's not agreed yet. This is the amount they've allocated to Bridgend, 23 million. Some of that money being for that numeracy initiative, and some of it being for shared prosperity. That is what UK government have allocated us. And we have to put a regional plan together, which they've dictated, which we're doing. And then hopefully in October, we'll have that money allocated. That has got nothing to do with CCR. Shared Prosperity Fund is a UK government scheme. The CCR city deal and our contribution is a completely different thing. The two things are different.
Okay. The percentages on the allocation aren't related in any way whatsoever.
No, they're two different things. One is UK government, and one is city deal. Yeah, so we could have one higher than the other. You know, the two things are not related, Councillor. One is UK government, one is CCR.
Okay, we'll have to move it along. I think you've answered that quite. Thanks, Ian. Can you put your hand down when you get a chance, Ian, please? Next number I got up is Councillor Jonathan Pratt. You have a question, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, is there any point in asking for details on the local investment plan information? I am particularly interested in, let me go find it because I've been scrolling up and down, bear with me. Where are we? Yes, so it's the Bridgend County Tourism Event Support and the Bridgend County Local Destination Management and Marketing. Do you have details of those for this meeting, or will they be given to us at a later date?
Bear with me.
I've got they're on page 10 of the report.
Yeah,
which is page 32.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Ian to come in because I know he can probably tell you a bit about them now, as well as we could also probably send you information. But I know Ian knows exactly what's in all these bids, so he'll be able to give you a flavour. And then, of course, we can send you the detailed information behind. So.
Yeah, thank you, Janine. Thank you for the question, Councillor Pratt. I mean, I'm happy to address the two specific ones you raised in detail. But as Janine's already said, obviously behind all of this is an element of detail, both in relation to the how the funding is broken down and tapered over the years, in relation to the specific outputs that the programmes are looking to hit, as well as the outcomes, and then as well in relation to the activity. So in relation to the events fund itself, mainly that will be a resource to support event organisers to enhance and develop new events within the county borough. In very, very simple terms, Councillor Pratt. There is also, as I'm sure you're aware, a growing number of events which bring economic benefit, both in terms of day visitors as well as night visitors, that actually require a bit of administrative support in terms of the Event Safety Advisory Group. As I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but there's a lot of work that goes on around that as well. So it's about enhancing existing activities as well as bringing and attracting new. In terms of the destination management side of it then as well, that is in relation to marketing and PR and promotion of the destination, as well as opportunities to work across different businesses to develop products and packages to promote those, again, to attract day visitors and overnight visitors. So in very simple terms, those are what those two proposals are heading towards. What I should add as well in relation to those, there will shortly be a revised destination management plan being put forward to Cabinet for consideration, and those sorts of activities are highlighted as options for development within that plan. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yes, it does. But I suppose, yeah, this will probably, I'll have to scrutinise it myself on my own at some point. I won't be getting the answers that I won't, but I understand why. But no, that's fine. I'm happy with that. It gives a bit more detail than what it gave in the report itself. Thank you very much.
I mean, sorry, Chair.
No, go on.
One thing I would add as well. It's a general point, but I think what Councillor Pratt has raised does touch on the issue. I very heavily caveat the subject to change point, because I think at the point where these proposals were developed, of course, the detail on what was eligible and ineligible was very, very scant, to be frank. So clearly what we didn't want was officers expending an awful lot of time fully fledging detail if actually UK Gov come back and say, no, you can't do that sort of thing, or yes, we want you to do this sort of thing. So there is more work to be done. That's an important point to make. But the bones and the framework of what we're talking about here, as well as the outputs, outcomes and financing, that's pretty, as Janine said, in quite a lot of detail already.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much.
I'm going to ask you, do the Cabinet members wish to add anything to this conversation? Anybody?
Yes, please, Chair.
Councillor Spanswick, is it? I've lost my link a little bit here. Go ahead, Councillor Spanswick.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just take my hand out.
I bring in.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me stop you a second, Councillor Spanswick. Councillor Bledsoe, you're next, okay? So once Councillor Spanswick is done, I bring you in, okay? Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks to the officers, especially Diane, for the massive amount of work that's gone putting this together. But it is, as Janine said, the summary report and aimed at improving life's chances. And one of the big parts of that, I would hope, is life's chances, but life expectancy as well, because we are fully aware from our valley areas down to the sea, the difference in life expectancy is remarkable, and we need to try and narrow that gap, not just in Bridgend, across the country. But this, I would welcome the 23 or up to 25 million pound investment, and really welcome that. We'll know soon, hopefully, whether we get it or not, and the further details, because central government are a bit sort of weak on detail, and we do need to have the detail, because that then is a time to perhaps go into the more in-depth questions of what these programs are going to produce and what are we going to achieve and how they're going to work. It's a little bit disappointing trying to hear the trying to mix this up with the CCR City deal, which is two separate issues. They're all there for the benefit of the county borough and great work they're doing. It's just disappointing to hear certain members trying to mix the two up, which is unfortunate. But I welcome this and look forward to hearing the positive results soon.
Well, go back to your point on detail, Councillor Spanswick. That was brought up in the pre-meeting, the lack of detail, but it's sort of been explained to us. But like I said, it is difficult with detail, isn't it? So, are you done, Councillor Spanswick?
That will come. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bledsoe, you have a question. Who's it to? Could you say who's the two, please?
Chair, I noticed Councillor Gebby also wanted to speak as a cabinet member.
Sorry,
I don't know if you wanted to go first.
I apologise. I didn't see the hand. I'm looking at Councillor Gebby. Do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Right, I suppose for me, I want to thank officers for the amount of work that they've done, particularly as I know that the late the notice of the applications came through late, so they had to work really hard behind the scenes. I think that's really important to note. And I think it's also important to note that Bridgend is in the middle of a region. And whatever we do, we have to think about everywhere else, because if somebody's working in RCT or the Vale or Cardiff or Carmarthen or wherever, then the reality is they need to get there. And without all the infrastructure behind it, then that doesn't work. So we need to think about our partnership working, I suppose. And I just for some reassurance, I suppose, for some newer members, is that it's really easy to get confused with the different deals, with all the acronyms that they use. When I first joined council, I was absolutely gobsmacked, I want to say, at the amount of acronyms that we used by all sorts of different people. And I really didn't understand where they all fitted in with each other. So I think it might be useful, because I'm aware that we're going to have a briefing on the Cardiff City deal. I think it might be useful for us to have that so we can understand where it all fits in together. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gebbie. Councillor Bledsoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 3 points, and they are more questions that I think that could be offered clarity on. As has been mentioned, a few of us are new members and weren't involved in conversations that went on before our arrival. If possible, I'd like to build on the point that was being raised by Councillor Williams, and I will try and be clear because I don't want to cause any confusion. The application that we've made for this fund as our result of our leaving of Brexit means that we have applied for it as a region, which is the same region as the Cardiff Capital Regional Deal is covered by. They involve the same local authorities. Now, those who have decided how much BCBC pay into that amount in order to pay our fair share, because it isn't just divided by 12, have decided that we make up 9.4% of that, and we pay 9.4% of the contribution to CCRD to pay our fair share. Therefore, when money is being handed out by UK central government, anything less than 9.4% should be considered as a bad deal, because 9.4% is our percentage of the Cardiff Capital Regional Deal. I'm not linking what we pay into a deal into what we are getting out. What I'm saying is that 9.4% is the pre-agreed percentage that we are of the CCRD. Therefore, 8.3% is a poor return from the UK government, not from the Cardiff Capital Regional Deal Board, but from the UK government, because we are 9.4% of the CCRD region. So therefore, we look at the overall 10 local authorities who have paid out, and we are 8th out of 10. Now, I believe that's another poor return, being 8th out of 10. We are not getting what I consider to be our fair share from this fund, and I'm basing that on the figures that are provided to me in this report. So when any mention is made of what we pay into the CCRD, from my point of view, anything less than that out from anywhere is a poor return, and I'd like to understand on what basis we're getting 8.3%, who has made that decision, who has put our case forward, and who has decided that we get 8.3%. So I would like an answer from that, either from a cabinet member or from an officer. Moving on, page 26 of this report singles out town centres, stating that Bridgend Town Centre in particular needs improvement, but all the town centres need attention. I will agree with that statement, and I will also agree that Bridgend Town Centre needed singling out due to the problems that it has. So I'd like to see where in this fund Bridgend Town Centre is getting funding of this £25 million. I notice a reference to a carbon neutral market, which for a multitude of different reasons I feel is very, very good and needs support. But I'd like to know what directly this fund gives to Bridgend Town Centre, given that it has been singled out on page 26 as needing, and I'll get the words right, particular needs improvement. So where in this fund is that money? Okay. And finally, Mr. Chair, sorry, in relation to something. I'm just
feeling for the officers writing all this down, Martin.
No, that's fine.
Sorry,
that's fine. And finally, it was something that I picked up from something that Yayan mentioned in relation to the RCT's administration of that. I would like to know fully and very clearly the basis and the lineage of how things go through Rhondda and Taff. From the point that we make the application and who the application is made to, what role actually does the administration of it? Because I'm certainly never going to make any public accusation in this. However, when you get a local authority who administers any fund on behalf of 10 councils, who then gets the highest proportion of all of the funding going through to them, double what we're getting, I think that it's incumbent on us councillors to understand that process, because I would have liked to have seen nearly 16% of the money coming into BCBC, and I'd like to understand how the local authority who was chosen to administer it managed to achieve that.
Martin,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Councillor Betso. The last point you made there, Councillor Betso, I think may need answering outside this meeting, because there's quite a lot of detail you're asking for there. Am I right in thinking that? You were asking for a lineage from the beginning to the end. Do you think that can be answered in this meeting?
I just want to very clearly understand and publicly how one of the 10 local authorities has been chosen to administer the fund. What do our applications go through them? How does that work? Okay. Because in any walk of public life, when one authority is chosen to administer it and they are very clearly in receipt of double the amount that we are, I think
you did say you did a full detailed, description of all the way. I don't know if I'll ask Yayan now. Yayan, are you happy to provide that in this meeting? Is that something you can do?
I can. If Janine, if you're happy for me to jump in
on that particular point, not the other three.
Yeah, and I can offer some information, Chair and Councillor Betts. So if you want further information, we like Chair suggests we can have a separate conversation. Okay. On the first point of poor return, I think it's fair to say I'd agree. I don't think Bridgend has had its fair share through UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and I think the reason for that lies in the metrics that were used by UK Gov in determining the allocation. So 40%, so bearing in mind this is how they decided the national pot, how's this going to be based out into each local authority area. So 40% of the decision was based on per capita, 30% was used to use the same needs-based index as was used for Community Renewal Fund. And as Janine's already mentioned, we and Caerphilly had major problems with that and wrote to ministers to make them aware of the flaws in that. And then 30% is allocated using the Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation. So that is kind of how that decision was made by UK Gov about what money goes where, and that's how we've ended up with the allocations that we've got. Specifically on the role, coincidentally, we did today have through the draft legal agreement from Rhondda and Taff, which sets out how, exactly as you've questioned, Councillor Betts, exactly how the claims process would work, how the reporting process would work, and ultimately where the accountability would sit. But what I would just highlight is that the decision on the allocation and the splits across the region was made by UK Gov first. And then within the region, the local authorities between themselves agreed who would be the lead. So it didn't follow the other way around, if that makes sense, Councillor Betts. So the decision on the money was made first, and then the decision about the lead was made second. So to go to your specific question of how did they end up with 16%, when you take those three metrics I described, you apply them to the figures at a UK level, that's how RCT ended up with more than us. It was basically the data was in their favour rather than ours. And I know detailed letters have been written to the ministers outlining concerns for this. I know we've done a lot of work through the Industrial Communities Alliance as well, who've written reports on this. There's been a select committee in Parliament about this exact issue, so that there's a lot of kind of work behind the scenes. If I can just quickly touch on your point about Bridgend specifically, Councillor Betts. So at this point in time, we don't have a ward by ward breakdown of the money. There are two main reasons for this. One, predominantly this is a revenue-based fund. We do have some capital proposals within there, but predominantly it is a revenue fund. And the second thing is saving for the capital proposals. All of this will take place across the county generally. So things like the business grant that you'll see referenced in the report, things like the support through the framework, that is going to be available consistently across the county. So latterly, we'll be able to give you that demographic, how many businesses from the town centre have applied for the fund. But at this point in time, we haven't allocated it, if that makes sense. So it's one of those ones we'll be able to pick up through monitoring rather than know from the start.
Okay. Is that the last point? Are you going to answer any of the questions, Janine? I think there was the first one, 2 or 3.
No, I think Ian's touching all of them, Chair.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Any cabinet members would like to come in to comment on that? Councillor Bledsoe, are you happy with the response?
I'm more than happy with the answer from the officers. I'm obviously not happy, seeing our figures compared to neighbouring figures, and
Mhm.
on whatever the cause has to be challenged. You know,
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say that it is being challenged. It has been challenged. I don't know if that
Yeah.
challenge is ongoing. I'm not. I think it is. And and thank you for the responses. There was quite. There was a
Yeah.
lot of questions, and it was a good answer. In fairness,
as I say, no issue at all with the officers, but looking at the black and white figures, I don't think any of us can be happy. And it's our duty within this committee is to understand how that's done and to learn how we challenge it, because going forward, we've had meetings with Janine with the amount of cuts that are going on here, and every opportunity where this is apparently is half of what we used to receive, we're looking at less money being invested in our area, and
that's right. That's right.
we have to challenge it on every level that we can. And that's not about questioning the officers, it's questioning the process.
Thank you,
Councillor
Councillor Bledsoe.
Bledsoe.
Oh, sorry, Janine,
Can
go
I
on.
come
Yeah.
back in? Yeah, Chair, thank you. I think
Yeah.
one of the things that we found really frustrating was when the census population figures come out. Bridgend is a growth area, and we're growing by whatever the percentage was, 5%, and we're just literally just short of Cardiff as a growth area. We're one of the fastest growing areas in Wales, outstripping lots and lots of other areas, or keeping pace with the capital. So if you look at that, how important we are in a regional and a South Wales and a Welsh context, and yet having a very disappointing settlement on the Shared Prosperity Fund. So we absolutely get it, whereas frustrated as well when we see these figures, but this is why we've put this table in there to show you, to share with you, and be as transparent as possible about what we're doing. So those decisions were made by UK Gov. What we need to do is challenge it. We can't change this allocation, but I think what we need to do is ensure that when they are looking at the next round, that they understand the growth figures, etc., that Bridgend is facing. So
Thank you, Janine. Thank you. Councillor Martin Williams, you want to come back in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I did step away because I think it was fair for people to come back. I just a couple of observations on the answer I had. I do have another question as well, sorry, Chair. I don't think 330,000 is a small amount of money. I think it is in the scheme of things relatively, but I think we need to, in these times of austerity and cuts, I think we need to recognise that to many of the people we represent, in fact, all of the people we represent, £330,000 is a significant sum and can make a difference to their communities. So I just think we need to be mindful of language there. I would have liked to see more detail, not full detail, I accept that, but it would have nice to see some supporting information behind the appendix, almost like the appendix to the appendix, with maybe a list of aspirational projects with some indication of spend. It's not there. I would appreciate if when that does become available, that it is shared with this committee. But my final question on this point is really, it's linked to austerity really, and we had an overview with the Communities Directorate, I think last week it was, and it was laid bare quite clearly how austerity and cuts and decisions this council has made in the past 10 years have left the Communities Directorate starved of resource, and I think someone said, I won't name them, but someone said, verging on not being fit for purpose. We've just been given, or hopefully about to be given, £23 million to spend. How are we able to be confident that we can deliver that £23.5 million in what I think is 2.5 years? It does strike me, and this is kind of what I do for a living as well, that's pretty aggressive given the infrastructure. I mean infrastructure as in the organisation we have to suddenly deliver that, and it's a very varied programme. So it's not one big project or two big projects. It's multiple small bits of money, and I do appreciate how difficult that is to spend. So what confidence do we have to deliver that? And that may spill out to how we're going to procure and what partners we're going to use. But it's really about the confidence that I need to understand.
Janine?
yes, I'm going to bring Ian in a minute,
Yes.
Councillor Williams, but it is, you are hit the nail on the head there. It's something that we are thinking is going to be very challenging, because it's not just 23 million. They've given us, they've split it up over year 1, year 2, year 3. So they're even telling us what we need to spend now. And bearing in mind now, we're not getting a decision till October, so we can't really commit any spend till October, and they want a spend by next April at a percentage spend. So it is challenging. It is very clear that we don't have the resources currently in the directorate to manage this. What we are thinking of doing in the interim period is moving resources around off other items, which won't be done then, to try and get a head start on getting some of this money out the door and getting some of these schemes out and away. But you are right, it's difficult. We're going to have a team. We may be able to use some of the monies in the allocation as its revenue to fund a team, but it's something that we are looking at very closely. And some of this as well, it is skilled work. This isn't just getting people in to do some admin work. This is getting people in who understand communities, facilities, who understand grant schemes, in order to take this fund and get it fully committed and spent. And more's the point, make sure we get the outputs that we need, because you can push money out the door. That's, you know, the easiest thing in the world. But what we need to make sure is that these schemes are hitting the mark and getting good outputs, the outputs that we're expecting from the scheme. So I'll just stop there and invite Yayan to come in, because this is something I know him and the team are looking at in detail.
Yeah, thank you, Janine, and it is a very, very good question. I suppose, Councillor, the simple answer is it depends. There are a number of schemes within, particularly around the people and skills theme, which largely one could class as continuity. So this is activity that has, in part, been running under European funding. So to a degree, there are teams that could transition over, as Janine suggested, subject to, of course, appropriate procedures and processes. So you could arguably see a level of confidence, a level of continuity, and a level of fitting and matching into a new programme. There are also proposals that have been, if you like, in development for a while. So there's a head of steam, there's a momentum behind them. And again, you know, there is less, but still a degree of confidence, I would say, in terms of those coming through. Then you have what are new proposals, which have 2 and a bit years to hit the ground and deliver and complete. And I think you're absolutely right, there are some key challenges within that. I also think when we look at the difference between capital and revenue, where we look continuity of revenue, you can almost forecast that with reasonable accuracy, subject to vacancies to the penny. Whereas, of course, with capital, we have procurement processes that need to be undertaken. We have relevant licenses, permissions, consent, planning, etc. that needs to be secured. And, of course, then we need to be able to source contractors. So there's a lot more complexity, I think, that will come into that. I would also add the final point, which we have to kind of get the balance right, I suppose, is the mixture of delivery models I referred to. So where, as an organisation, we're able to commission relatively significant revenue delivery, actually that isn't a time that can be done in quite a timely fashion. Where we're procuring large capital works, of course, there's more time to that. Then when you contrast that with the in-house delivery, of course, as I'm sure Janine has briefed members on, there are particular challenges at the moment in terms of staff recruitment. So any activity that looks to bring in new staff, either for ourselves or for partner organisations, there are months and months of potential lead-in and potentially not success at the end of those processes at the moment. So I go back to the simple point. I've given a lot of information, but the simple point is it really does depend between programme and programme in terms of the point about, are they continuing, are they new, are they revenue, are they capital, and what is the delivery model we're looking at. So the analysis of risk in terms of that confidence is broken down in quite a lot of detail.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just come back then that's my final point. I mean, I did ask how confident are we that we'll deliver, and it was a very unkind question, I think, but how confident are we that we will deliver the 23 million? Assuming we get it. Yeah, I don't need a number. That would be extremely unfair.
No. I think where we've got continuity in revenue, we're very confident. Where we've got new and capital, we've got challenge for the reasons I've outlined. But we've got a lot of officers dedicated to making this work. And as Janine said, we're exploring options in terms of moving people off some activity onto this activity so that we can make sure we maximise every resource we possibly can. A key point, though, which I think could truly make the difference, and it is a small technical point, but really, really important, is if we are able to shift from fixed annual allocation to a multi-annual allocation, that's a game changer, frankly, Councillor Williams, in relation to the delivery of this programme. And I think you get much less caution from officers if we were looking at a multi-annual funding allocation.
Thanks. And just one final point. Sorry, Chair.
Yeah,
It just came to me now. Very, very quick. Very, very quick. I think it was Janine who mentioned outputs. I could have been Janine. Are we monitored on outputs, or is it purely? So is there a clawback? Will we be penalised if we don't achieve the output that we set out to achieve? And then that is my final question, Chair.
Yes, Ian, I'm not so sure about the clawback piece. I know we definitely have to deliver outputs. All grant schemes come with dedicated outputs. We will be monitored against those and we'll be seen to have to achieve them. But I'm not sure if there's a clawback position.
Yeah, I'm going to reserve comment on that if I can at the moment, because we haven't seen the detail of the funding agreement. So I wouldn't want to speculate, Chair, Councillor Williams. Okay,
we're going to move on. Thanks for that, Councillor Williams. We have one hand up now, the last one, hopefully, is Councillor Colin Davis. Colin?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. As you heard earlier on, I declared an interest. I was going to leave it to the officers. They're very capable. They've given some really good answers, but I'll say a few things perhaps that they'd like to say and they haven't. A reminder to everybody, Wales is losing out on 1.1 billion over the 3 years. You can't ignore a massive amount of funding. It's mind-boggling, really. Another point, and I'm not just saying this, and I don't mean this as a joke. If you're not happy, write to our local MP. Yeah, this is a UK government fund, so they've been in charge of the process, the allocation, the criteria, the ultimate amount. Yeah, so write to him, tell him what you think. Yeah. A few points as well regarding the comparison between the European Social Fund funding and this funding. They said this structural fund would be less bureaucratic, it would be more transparent, there'd be more guidance, there'd be as much money. None of that is actually true. As you've heard from the officers, we've been asked to do things in a probably truncated by 50% the amount of time we should have in order to do this. So the fact they've come up with what some people consider to be basic proposals are not. There's actually quite a lot of detail there, and now we'll give them a bit of time hopefully to put on more detail. But they really haven't had enough time in order to do a proper job on this, and that's not their fault. As I've said, we're 6 months into this financial year when the UK government are going to be allocating funding for this financial year and 2 years beyond that. So somebody mentioned the precursor bid, which is Community Renewal Fund. That has been extended now. I think it's been extended on at least 2 occasions. It was originally due to end last December, and now I think it's been extended until December or January this year. And that's the UK government realising they didn't give people enough time. Another point then with regards to RCT, taking on the role of coordinating and reporting back. That's a booby prize. It's not easy to report back on a bid, 10 local authorities, loads and loads of different projects. God knows how many, if you did a matrix on how many different projects there are, and having to report back on that, I'd pay them twice as much. Yeah. So the amount of contribution, the 330 is for regional projects, and we can't really see how much RCT are receiving for running it. But in terms of the employment and skills side of things, and the Community Renewal Fund, which is the one last year, Torfaen were running that. So it's no real surprise that Torfaen didn't want to run this one because of the demands involved. And as Ian and Janine said, it's really hard at the moment to recruit people and recruit the right people. So getting the right people to do this, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's a really complex issue. I think the councillors are right to ask issues around consultation on certain things like the plan for the market, etc. but it is such a complex issue. And, you know, if you look at the table there on page 20 in terms of the allocation, it's no surprise that the Vale and Monmouthshire are the lowest, because it reflects in part 30% the deprivation in that area, and that's a double-edged sword. So do you want to be RCT where you've got all that deprivation? Do you want to be Cardiff whereby you've got all that deprivation? Cardiff is seen as, you know, a capital city with, you know, lots of wealth and employment and enterprise and opportunity and stuff, but it also masks a massive amount of deprivation. It's probably in terms of the Welsh Index multiple deprivation, bottom 10, bottom 20%. You're probably looking at a quarter of the city coming under that category. So, you know, it is a double-edged sword, and I think councillors should think about the fact of where we are. And okay, the funding formula wasn't ideal, but the 30% in terms of deprivation, do we want any more? No, we don't. Thank you, Chair.
You got a question then, Colin? No, just
okay. Just jumping in and making a few
Thank you for that. That was very interesting. I haven't got any further hands up. Does any cabinet members want to come say anything before we move on? No. Okay, we shall. If that's done, we shall move on to the. Where are we? Let's find where I am. Levelling Up Fund. On to the Levelling Up Fund.
Chair, I am sorry, I have got my hand up.
I couldn't see it, Councillor Gebby, and apologies.
That's all right, that's why I'm shouting.
It's there now on the top. Yeah, go on, carry on.
All right. It's not so much a question. I just think as members of council, we need to be cognizant of the fact that it not only is it difficult to get a workforce at the minute, but the costs are spiralling out of control. So whatever applications we've made for whatever, there's going to be changes throughout it because we won't have any other choice. And I think it's interesting to note that, you know, right down to our school contracts, we're all very aware that during the summer, that cost increased exponentially due to the cost of living rise. So I think it's something that as members, we need to be all cognizant of. So I'm expecting all those officers to come back and tell us that they need to make amendments to the plans that we have anyway. But I just think it's really worth noting that. But thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Gebby. Okay. Is Rachel still on the call? Rachel?
Yes, Chair.
I'm going to move on to the Levelling Up Fund straight into that. Is that okay? Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so item 5, the Levelling Up Fund. I don't know who the corporate director is for this, unfortunately, so they'll have to announce themselves to the committee. And is it you, Janine? You're on mute, Janine.
Yes, it is, Chair. I am responsible for both of these funds. So I'll just give a little introduction, and I've got lots of my officers on the call. I've got Ian Sherwood still with us, and we're joined by Delith Webb. Delith is my head of regeneration, and I've also got John Parsons on the call, who is head of planning and strategic transport. So a lot of my team were very, very heavily involved in levelling up. So if I may just give an introduction, Chair, and explain where we are currently, what we've done, and then what I might do is to invite the officers in at particular points during the report to explain some of the background, and some of the projects we're taking forward. So Levelling Up Fund is the second bit, or the second half, dare I say, of the government's Levelling Up agenda. So we've got the Shared Prosperity Fund, and now we've got Levelling Up Fund. Now, this was announced by the UK government in their spending review back in 2020, and it's a programme of capital works, mostly capital, some revenue, up to 2025. Now, what they've allocated is £4 billion overall across the UK. 800 million of that is for Wales. So for starters, if we look at the proportion of that 4 billion and 800 billion for Wales. Now, each local authority can put in a bid for levelling up funding for their constituencies. So MP constituencies. So we have got 2 constituencies, Bridgend and Ogmore, and we can put in bids for up to £20 million for each constituency. Now, you only get one chance. If you get a bid approved, Chair, and it's £4 million, you can't come back in for the other 16 million. You're only allowed to put one bid in for each constituency up to a maximum of 20 million. And then the second bit is you can put in a major transport bid for up to 50 million. So if you work that out, you can have 2 bids for 20 million, which is 40 million. And you can have a major transport bid up to 50 million. So that means each authority in total could probably apply for up to 90 million. And now there's 22 authorities, so that doesn't work into 800 million overall. So it's very clear that the Levelling Up Fund is not going to allow us to do everything we want across Wales. So that's the first thing I would say. Now, the Levelling Up Fund, it's a good fund, it's a capital fund, so we mustn't lose sight of that. But it's got some very, very specific criteria to it. It's about supporting cultural assets. So it's got a heritage part to it. It's got town centre regeneration, town and community regeneration. That's a part to it. And the third part to it is transport. And one of the other things of this Levelling Up Fund is that if you submit a bid, you have to submit 10% match fund. So if we're putting a bid in for 18 million, for instance, we'd have to secure 1.8 million from either a third party or something like the National Lottery, etc., for the match fund, or indeed Bridgend Council itself. But each of these bids has to also be endorsed by the MP from the constituency that you're submitting the bid from. And we've done an awful lot of work with the MPs and the constituencies. So what I'm going to do very quickly is tell you that we have submitted 2 bids in August this year, and we're hoping to get an outcome by Christmas. The first bid was for the Grand Pavilion in Porthcawl, and that's a refurbishment of that building. And I'm going to invite Delith Webb in to talk about that shortly. And the second bid, a major transport bid we submitted, was for the Penprisk Road Bridge in Pencoe, to remove that level crossing, put in a new road bridge and a footbridge. We've put a bid in for that. Now, we didn't, unfortunately, manage to get a bid together for the Ogmore Valley and for the Ogmore constituency. Now, Chair, that was not for the lack of trying, and I'm going to invite Ian in later to tell us a bit more about that. We put together 2 or 3 different bids, did an awful lot of work, and every time we spoke to Levelling Up colleagues from UK government, they told us quite firmly that none of those bids would be supported. Even an employment hub in the valleys, they didn't think it met levelling up criteria, which we were astounded by, because what's better than jobs in the valleys for levelling up? So what we have submitted is 2 bids, one for the Grand Pavilion for up to 20 million and one for the Penprisk Road Bridge, which I think at the minute is roughly circa 25 million, but it could be more. So that's just a little bit of an introduction to the process, Chair. So what I am going to do now is to invite Delith in to tell us a little bit more about the Grand Pavilion in Porthcawl. Now, I would say, Chair, that a very important bit of this is Arwen are our cultural partners. And they have been fundamental in helping us and working with us to develop that bid for the Grand Pavilion. It's been hosting the Elvis Festival all weekend, so I don't know whether Richard is actually with us on the call, because I'm sure he's been very, very busy. But if he isn't here, I would invite Delith in, please, to just talk a little bit about that scheme. So Del, could you come onto the call, please?
Hi, are you able to see me?
Good afternoon, Delith. Yes, we can see and hear you.
Good afternoon. For the purpose of the recording, I'm Delith Webb and I'm the Group Manager for Regeneration. So if I can just give you a little bit of information really about the Porthcawl Grand Pavilion project that was put in as part of the LUF application programme. What was quite clear is that the LUF prospectus set out quite a clear agenda that what they wanted to support was cultural assets, creative spaces, galleries, visitor attractions, and heritage assets. So I think officers are quite confident and quite clear that the pavilion project strongly meets a number of those objectives. And since the fund was announced back in 2021, that we've done a significant amount of work to support that application, to ensure that we give it the best opportunity to be successful. So the project itself has been in development since 2016, actually, when Awen, who's our Cultural Trust partner and partner in the project, commissioned a study on the options for enhancing and redeveloping our Grade 2 listed building. The principal objectives originally were the renewal of the pavilion to address some significant issues and risk to the building fabric. However, once the programme was announced, it became quite clear that this project, if we were to enhance it further, would be able to support and develop a much bigger enhancement of the building and to support a much greater offer from within the building. So the sort of an overview of the new facilities that have been included within the feasibility and design work to support the application. They include a new function space within the first floor, new rooftop function space, cafe spaces on the first floor with elevated views across the channel, new studio theatre and auxiliary facilities, an increased and improved welfare facility offer, including changing places. There will be space for business incubation and workshop space on the street level, and there will also be new office facilities there. So BCBC, whilst the original work was being completed, BCBC committed a sum of 210,000 towards the development of the project, and that has covered rebus stages 1 to 3 in terms of design work, and that has allowed us to be fairly confident that we've got the right amount of detail to support the application. And I think that hopefully provides sufficient synopsis of the pavilion project. As Janine said, we would anticipate a response to that towards the end of the autumn. We are continuing to be in dialogue with the UK government. We've taken a lot of advice from them, and we've got a contact within the LUF team that keeps us up to date on any information that they are able to feed back to us. Up until now, we've had no indication as to whether they will look at this favourably or not. We've been asked for a few points of clarification. We'd like to think that that's a positive approach, in that they want to clarify some things with us. But as I said, it will be the end of autumn before we've got any indication if it's been successful or not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Delith. May I just add to that, Chair? I mean, I think what is really important to note here is that the Grand Pavilion needs significant expenditure on it. It's the most beautiful listed building, but it's right on a seafront, and it's had the ingress of that salt water, and it needs some real structural repairs. It also needs updating to make it a 21st century conference and to improve the facilities that are there. Now, without the likes of the Levelling Up Fund monies, there is no way we could refurbish that building. The council doesn't have the amount of capital required in order to do this work. We are very, very dependent on external funding to do very large capital schemes like this. So hopefully, if we do get a successful outcome, we're able to ensure the sustainability of that building for the next 50, 60 years. The future generations, we'd like to increase the footfall, the number of people who come there, the number of shows on offer, the amount of employment. This is a very good news story in the main, because we don't have the ability to undertake that work without some of this investment. So I'll just stop there, Chair. Now, do you want to take questions on this bid, and then we can move on to others, rather than go through all of them. What would you prefer to do, Chair?
Well, there's only two, isn't there? There's the Pen Prisk and this one, and there's the failed. You explained the failed Ogmore one basically. So
Well, no, it's not a failed Ogmore one. We didn't.
No?
We haven't. No, unless we haven't put a bid in,
Don't put a bid
because
in,
every
okay.
bid we put together was not acceptable to
Okay.
to LUF. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Well, I
yeah.
got a string of hands gone up, Janine. So I think we bring him in now. I think would be best. I can
Okay.
ask the cabinet member for the whose responsibilities is first, Neil O'Farr, to come in and then take questions from the councillor. Is that okay?
Yes.
As I say, Chair, did you want me to come in after the questions? If there's any points that I...
It's up to you, Councillor Farr. If you want to wait, quite happily on the screen there. Do you want to do that?
Yep, I'll wait.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, you stay there. You stay on the screen, and I'll bring you in towards the end. Thank you. First up then is Councillor Nora Clark.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very exciting project. It's exciting for Porthcawl, and let's face it, it's exciting for the whole of the county borough and further afield, of course. My question would be is going on from what Councillor Gebby just said regarding rising prices, etc., etc. As time goes on, obviously prices are going up daily. And my question would be, is 20 mil going to be enough? And if it's not enough, where will that extra money come from? You know, we all know that from Maesteg Town Hall, how much extra money had to be ploughed into that because of unforeseen circumstances. So my question is, if it's not enough, what will happen, you know, to the project?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Councillor Clark, and we are extremely mindful of that because, of course, we've done a great job with Maesteg Town Hall, but it hasn't been without some unforeseens. Once you start opening up these beautiful old buildings, you do see things you can't see until you open them up. So what we have done is learned lessons from previous schemes, and this scheme has got a significantly large contingency in it. And a risk contingency against it as well. We've done some very detailed design work so far. We need to go a little bit further as well. But the upshot is that if there are some unforeseens, or if costs rise, then I'm afraid we're going to have to relook at the design and re-engineer the design accordingly. We don't have additional monies to be able to spend on that building, so it'll be a bit of what we call, it's not a very nice word, but it's called value engineering. When you look at the building and look at what elements you can do in latter phases should more money become available. So hopefully, if we do get the monies and we go out to tender, we do get a tender sum that comes in that's within that threshold, leaves us a contingency. If not, plan B is to relook at the design and see what we can engineer out as a separate phase. For sure, the most important thing is addressing the structural concerns of the building, and that's at least more than 50% of the cost. We have to do that to stop that building falling down. That's clear. But then some of the other things are the things that are nice to do. The refurbishment of this, that and the other, putting in the cafes and bars. We definitely want to do them, but if it gets to it, it's how much of that we do. So it'll be a case of, will we get the money, number one? Number two, what does the tender process get us? And then having a serious look at the building with our partners, when should we need to change things up. The other thing as well is that the Welsh Government, we had a meeting with the tourism team at Welsh Government, and one of the questions they asked us, and I thought it was a very pertinent question actually, is what type of conferencing kit are you putting into the building? Are you putting the latest technology in? Because of course, you know, if we wanted to be a major conference venue and attract those in, we need the latest technology. So one thing they had said is that maybe they could assist us with paying for some of that. So there's a little bit of something there, but in the main, I'm afraid we have to be in or around that 20 million budget. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask another one, Chair, if I may? Because it's not mentioned in the report. CADU. I take it that CADU is okay on board, etc., with all these alterations, because I know that it's been very difficult in the past to get things past them.
Yes, absolutely. Our conservation team are all over this. I'll hand it over to you, Del.
Oh no, I was just going to say exactly that, Janine, that the CADU have been down, they're on board, they're familiar with the building anyway, but we do, as part of the internal team, we do have our conservation and design team already on board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Jonathan Pratt, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I think I'll echo what Councillor Clark says. Fantastic project, and I do hope it goes ahead. My understanding is, though, if it does go ahead, that the pavilion will be closed for approximately 2 years, 24 months longer, if we're looking at Maesteg Town Council, Maesteg, the Town Hall, rather. You know, we'll go from there. Is there anything that the Borough Council is looking at to try and keep events alive in Porthcawl whilst the closure of the pavilion is in place? I know the Elvis Festival has already raised concerns about not being able to use the Grand Pavilion for their events. We're not going to have a pantomime for 2 years, for example. I mean, is there? I know we can't do an exact replacement on a temporary scale, but I mean, is the Borough Council looking at options to keep some sort of stability for our events in Porthcawl whilst the pavilion is closed?
Chair, Janine, sorry, I suggest we bring them up to Maesteg Town Hall once that's completed. That'll be a fantastic venue for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be fair, Councillor, it's incredibly difficult, isn't it? Because once we commence construction on that building, it belongs to the contractor. It doesn't belong to us. And anything that happens on that building it is their risk and their liability and their insurance. I mean, so some of our thought process was, is there any way you can allow some uses in the building? But the simple answer is you can't, I'm afraid. Once they take over that building, it will be out of commission. Yeah, we will look and work with Arwen, because Arwen are who run the facility for us. Arwen are currently looking, can they put on facilities in other places? For instance, the chair is correct, we'll have the brand new Maesteg Town Hall open and the stage, etc. You know, can we look to put events on there in the interim period, or what can we do in other facilities around Porthcawl? I mean, what we do know is they currently get around 80,000 visitors per annum at the moment, and they are targeting between 120 and 150,000 once the refurbishment is done, so twice as many really. What we will look at is, can we have the fastest, quickest construction programme? Can we look at times when it starts and finish to ensure that we can have a really nice event when it's, you know, is it in the run up to Christmas or is it the summer period? You know, we can look at some of those things, but unfortunately closing the premises does mean we will not have events in the pavilion for 2 years. But Arwen are working hard at that. They'll see whether they can reprogram around so you don't lose all of the momentum. And of course, people want to come back. That's an important thing as well. You know, we do want these users to come back and enjoy the new facility. Del, is there anything extra you want to add to that?
Well, I was just going to say, actually, I know that Richard, the Chief Executive of Owen's, actually on the call as well, and I'm sure he's busy listening and making sure that that's something that, you know, we do continue to have conversations on. But very much Owen are quite cognizant of the fact that you know, they to date they've completed the bulk of the consultation work that's gone into the design and a design exercise around the pavilion, and I know that that's been something that's been raised with them, and that they're quite cognizant of, and that jointly we would endeavour our best endeavour to ensure that we don't lose any of that footfall in the interim while it's closed.
Chair, would you like to invite Richard to comment on that? Because I can see he is on the call. Richard Hughes.
Richard Hughes, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, thanks very much.
There he is.
Thanks for the invitation. Thanks, Delith. Yes, for the record, Richard Hughes, Chief Executive of Owen Cultural Trust. Delighted to join you this evening. Just on the programming front there, from Councillor Pratt's comments, I think our priority will always be the local users first and foremost, and we have a lot of those in Porthcawl between the schools and other cultural groups that use it, very much the same as we've experienced in my stag, and is trying to look after them as best as possible when they won't have a venue for 2 years. I'm sure we'll work with colleagues at the council to try and see what we can do there. Experience tells me that they won't travel very far because their audiences won't travel. So we'll have to do what we can around Porthcawl, and that might be a combination of working with schools and other institutions to see what we can do to support that and keep the arts going at a community level as well when there isn't a major venue open. But hopefully 2 years will fly by, and during that time it's about building up the anticipation to ensure that we don't lose audiences throughout that time. But happy to take any other questions as well as you see fit, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Thank you very much. I got Councillor Martin Williams next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, I think I've confused myself. Are we asking questions specifically about Porthcawl now, or the broader Levelling Up Fund? I'm happy to refer.
I think we decided, Marty, because of the amount of hands that went up when Janine's finished and Derek finished, that we'd ask the questions on Porthcawl. So
I'll put my hand down and put it back up at the end if that's okay, Chair.
No, not a problem. Councillor Colin Davis, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'll ask a question this time instead of just making loads of points. So in terms of the pavilion and the allocated funding, is there any scope in there to do some sort of feasibility work around a temporary building somewhere in Porthcawl? So it could be rest-based sports fields, it could be renting a field from a farmer. I'm thinking of a National Steddfod type temporary building for that period of time. Could be paid for by, I don't know what the community benefit aspect of the procurement element of the contract is. It could be 106 from the regeneration workers coming up. But bear in mind, to be fair, you know, I mean, probably the town hall would lost quite a bit of revenue, but the pavilion generates a lot of revenue, not just for the pavilion, but obviously for Porthcawl, and it'd be a shame to lose that. And certainly over 2 years, might even lose some momentum. God forbid the Elvis Festival goes out elsewhere. I don't think it will, but you know what I mean. But essentially, coming back to that lump of funding, surely we can look at some of that for a short, quick feasibility study in terms of the costings of renting a field, using a sports field. And I know that puts some users out, but you know, looking at the sports fields, possibly even the car park. I don't know how much of that is going to be used for the regeneration, and also look at funding like there should be a significant element of the community benefit in the procurement contract, and also any other 106 funding that's coming there. And in theory, with the regeneration on the horizon, that should be soon. So just even looking at it and coming back with costings to see whether it's feasible or not, I think it's worth it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davis.
Could I just come in here, Chair?
Who's this? Is this Councillor Farr? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask him in? Councillor Davis, we have spoke about exploring other venues, especially in regard to Elvis Festival, because Elvis can't go anywhere else but Porthcawl. So we have spoke about, we looked at potential marquee in the Sandy Bay. And you know, we can look at the Comp School. We need to explore other venues preferably in Porthcawl, because people won't travel elsewhere. But you know, we also got venues in Connelly and Kenfigan Pyle that we can explore. That's not too far away. Can I just say, to start off with, Chair, can we say a very, very big thank you to all the officers and the team involved because a lot of work has gone into this project, and they have worked against really tight time frame to get the bid in. I think it's really, really exciting that that we've got this bid in for Porthcawl. I think it will provide local jobs for the residents. It will attract visitors to the place because there'll be facilities there, and residents have been asking what's in Porthcawl. I think this will provide a lot of activities and facilities for them. So yeah, I think we need to, health and safety must be first. We need to make sure it is safe and explore other venues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Farr. Thank you. Janine, do you want to add anything to Councillor Farr's answer to the to that question? No? Okay.
No, not really, Chair. The only one thing I would say is, unfortunately, the monies from the Levelling Up Fund, we wouldn't be able to use that for a feasibility at this stage. All of that money has to be spent on that project, and we've put a spend profile in. So what if we are looking at alternative venues, we'll have to do that within existing resources. And of course, we will work with Richard and Arwen, because they're the people who programme the work. We'll work closely with Arwen to look at that. The one thing I would say though, and maybe this might not be very, very popular, the Elvis Festival itself is spread throughout Porthcawl in a number of facilities, as well as the High Tide, as well as the pavilion. So the one thing we would like to do is to try and see whether we can work with them to find them another venue while the pavilion is not in use. But of course, that festival itself is much wider than just the pavilion itself. But I'll stop there, Chair.
Okay. Okay, Colin, you happy with that?
Not completely. As I say, I think, as I say, if it wasn't the fact that we were gonna lose, or Arwen rather is losing out on revenue, and revenue would be lost in the wider Porthcawl area, I think it's worth thinking about this in more detail. As Neil said, as Councillor Farr said, there may have been discussions. I'd like to see, any reports or outcomes of those discussions, because, you could still be making quite a bit of money while the pavilion's being built. And as I say, looking at alternative forms such as the community benefit aspect of the procurement contract. I'm presuming there is one. I hope there is one. And also the 106. So yeah, thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davis. We have Councillor Graham Walter next.
Thank you, Chair, and I concur with what's been said by Councillor Nora Clark and Councillor Jonathan Pratt. And Councillor Davis has taken probably the chunk of my first part of the two questions I wanted to ask, so I thank him for that. And that was about the potential for loss of revenue for many of the businesses in the nighttime economy whilst the pavilion is closed, because there are many bars and early evening restaurants that cater pretty much exclusively for, by doing sort of 2 sittings exclusively for shows, and whether any work can be done on that as to measure the potential impact. But I think we've covered some of that. The other point I wanted to ask, Janine, if I may, and thank you for your comprehensive briefing. You mentioned that the number of, for want of a better word, seats sold is somewhere around about 80,000 a year, and that it was anticipated that might go up to 120 to 140,000, which does rather pose the question of parking, because it is I speak as a ward member, it is already an issue for many residents for on-street parking when there are shows and events at the pavilion, and whether there has been any consideration about providing extra parking facilities on site or close to site, and if not, is that something that could be taken away and brought back for us to have a look at? So those are my 2 points. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Walter. Janine?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Councillor Walter. Yes, the parking thing is very interesting, isn't it? Because one of the things that we have been asked by Welsh Government is to encourage a modal shift, and to encourage, people to move to more sustainable forms of transport, such as trains and buses, etc. But we do know, if you're coming for a night out in the theatre, if you're coming to the pantomime with your children, it's Christmas, I can't see you catching a bus to come. You're probably going to drive and park. Now, what we what we are looking at, we've commissioned a parking study for Porthcawl. A very important part of the regeneration is this study, as part of the placemaking as well. And there's a number of things that we're looking at that. We're looking at possibly siting a multi-storey car park on the Hillsborough flat car park currently. That's something that we really want to look at. We're looking at peak times and flows. So what times would the shows be on in the evening as opposed to daytime use? Because there are people come to park for different reasons. In the summer, people come for day trip, and then you have a nighttime economy as well. So what we are doing is looking at all of those aspects and looking at the provision in Porthcawl, because the one thing we don't want to do is have an incredibly successful pavilion, but traffic chaos. That isn't something that we want to do, of course. So I don't have all the answers now, but it's a very important part of the study going forward. And we've got a number of years to get it right. So I suppose it's not just the pavilion. The pavilion is one part of a much larger piece for the regeneration of Porthcawl. So as soon as we have more information on that, very happy to come back and talk about that strategic transport plan that we have for Porthcawl, including the pavilion.
Okay, Councillor Walter, okay, happy with that?
Yes, thank you. I understand, it falls within the broader issue of parking across the town and the wider schemes that are afoot. But I think what you've said by not saying it is that there isn't any particular provision for on-site parking, whereas
no, there can't be. No, sorry.
Whereas
no.
we do have limited parking, but there is some on-site parking at the moment.
Yeah, there's no plans to increase the amount of parking there. We're going to obviously be refurbishing the building, but they won't, because it's a listed building. There's very little we can do with the actual structure apart from some extensions at the front. But the footprint of it will stay more or less the same.
But not removing the existing on-site parking.
I don't believe we are.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Walter. Thank you very much. Councillor Steve Bledsoe, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did originally have two questions, but Janine's answer just raised another one, so I do apologise for that, and I'm blaming you, Janine. Okay. Firstly, the easy one. I think I have the answer in the documentation, but I would like clarification. This is one bid per MP's area, and this one has been chosen. So when does the time run out as to when this starts again? I'm not sure if it's 2025. I'm not sure if I've misread that in the document, that the next funding tranche will be in 2025. I can see two heads nodding. Have I got that right?
I think so. At the moment, they're saying we have to complete these bids by, this work has to be done by April or March 25. So we're assuming that the next round of left starts from April 25. But if you think about it, they're probably going to open up that one in the next couple of years.
Yes,
So it's a couple of years process. Well, you would hope, Councillor Bledsoe. There's no guarantees with
that's
the UK
fine.
government that give you any time, but you would have thought the next round would open up. Yeah, because the one thing I will say is that we I suppose this does touch on a bit of a broader topic now, but we were quite disappointed with the narrow criteria for the left bids. I did touch on this at the beginning, because some of the things we were looking at in particular were employment hubs, an agri hub, which was a kind of like an agricultural market with food. We were looking at that for Pencode. We had so many amazing schemes that we thought could deliver, but unfortunately they didn't tick the left boxes for criteria. So the feedback we've given is, if you do a subsequent round, you must look at what the criteria should be, because, for instance, different parts of the UK will have different needs. In Wales in particular, it's about our economy, it's about jobs, it's about skills. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't money for elsewhere for that, because there is, because we've got the Shared Prosperity Fund that is meant to be ticking those boxes. But we do think the left bid needs a broader set of criteria going forward. So hopefully we'll be able to have a look at that. Yes, but the intention is this finishes by the 31st of March 25, and we're hoping left 2 takes off from there.
That's perfect. I
Yeah.
thought that was the case, so thank you for the clarification on that. My second question then is linked around the Grand Pavilion, but it does touch on Steg. We have the Maesteg Town Hall and we have the Grand Pavilion, which are absolute jewels in our crown of what we provide culturally. Maesteg Town Hall has hit a few snags, which has meant to increased costs and timescales, and the costs have been touched on in the past. Will there be a period of time when neither of them will be available to the members of BCB of Bridgend County, or will there be a period of time where Grand Pavilion, subject to this being successful, will not close until Maesteg Town Hall has reopened?
Ooh, that's a very good question. As planned, we think Maesteg will be finished before the Porthcawl Pavilion work starts. And the reason I'm saying that, and I've got Richard has joined
Yeah,
onto the
I
call
was going to
now.
ask Jenny, I was going to interject there. I think Richard popped up there. I think he's chomping at the bit to answer, I think.
Yeah, you know, I think there will be a lag, and the reason I'm saying, you know, there will be, you know, one will open and the other will close later. And the reason being is because, of course, if we are successful, we've got to finish the designs, submit any planning permission, then we've got to go to tender, then we've got to select a contractor, then they've got to go onto site. So to be honest, even if we get the green light there, it's going to take us about a year to get onto site, whereas Maesteg Town Hall will be finished hopefully by the end of this year and open in the spring. But Richard, please come in and give some more information.
Help us out, Richard, please.
Yes, no, I think you've hit the nail on the head, Janine. That would be the sequencing. We certainly hope to be in and commissioned in Maesteg in plenty of time before the Grand Pavilion would need to close for the redevelopment. And as Janine pointed out there's still a series of design phases to go through before we be in a position to appoint contractors. So within the county borough, we would certainly hope to have one of those venues open and available to the public. And not forgetting that we have got Blaengarrow Workman's Hall as well, which is available, albeit a smaller venue, and we can work around some of our community centres as well on some of the programme. But as to a major venue, we'd certainly be hoping that Maesteg would be available by that point.
Thank you, Richard. Steve?
That's fine. Thank you. It's just, look, in order to do necessary work, we have to lose the use of the buildings, and it would be a terrible shame if we lost both at the same time. So any possibility of having the one open, because they are both, they are both fantastic destination venues, and if we can, if it can be done that Maesteg opens before Grand closes, brilliant. And finally, and I hope this can be linked to this matter, is something that you mentioned, Janine, about in relation to Councillor Walter question. You mentioned about a potential multi-storey car park on close to the site in order to serve it. However, I've been in conversations in relation to the proposed LDP where multi-storey car parks are not being considered in any way for Bridgend. And I'm just wondering where the difference is there, because obviously Bridgend has lost a third of the and you may wish to tell me this isn't linked to this question, and will happily be quiet. But I was just taken by the difference in the proposal for a potential multi-storey to service this development that isn't being considered for Bridgend for the town centre.
Well,
And whether that's a question for a different forum, I'll happily say.
I'm mindful of time here too, Councillor Betts, to be honest. It's approaching 6 o'clock. We've got another report to get, after this report to get through yet, doesn't it? I do think we need to move on, be honest.
Can we take that up in a different forum then, Janine? Is that possible?
Of course we can. We're meeting on the town centre soon, so I'm quite happy for us to have that conversation then.
That's fine. I was pushing it a little bit. Thank you, Chair.
Right, no problem. Thank you, Councillor Betts. So, okay. Can we move on to the second half of this report then, Janine?
Yes, but by all means. So the next section of this report then is to thank you, Richard and Del. The second part of this report then is about the Penbrisk Bridge project. Now, Penbrisk Bridge is a major transport scheme. And again, I would say, Chair, that without this funding, the council would not be able to 100% not be able to fund this. It's a major infrastructure scheme. Now, we know there's a number of concerns in Pencode about traffic, the moratorium on development past the railway line, and pollution, etc. And we know for some time we have wanted, and I know Welsh Government have wanted, to address the level crossing at Pencode. So to remove the level crossing, increase the size of the Penprisk Road bridge itself, and then put some pedestrian bridges in. So as part of the Levelling Up Fund, there's a major infrastructure bid. And so what we have done is we haven't fully designed that bridge yet, because these things take significant amount of time to do. But what we have done is initial designs for the bridge. We've started what's called the well tag process, which is you have to go through Welsh Government for transport schemes, and we've done a bit of a public consultation on it. But we have submitted to the Levelling Up Fund for at least £25 million to put this bridge into place. Now I'm going to ask Jonathan Parsons to come and join the call, Chair. Jonathan is the Group Manager for Planning and also Strategic Transport, and whether John wants to add any detail to what I've just spoken about, and then we can take some questions, Chair.
Good afternoon, Jonathan. Do you fire away, mate? Thank you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. For the purposes of the recording, I'm Jonathan Parsons, Group Manager for Planning and Development Services, which includes strategic transportation. I think Janine has summed it up very nicely there. It's a major transport infrastructure project, which in concept sounds very simple. It's basically taking away old Victorian era infrastructure and replace it with a modern bridge, and also taking away the existing overbridge at the railway station end in Pencoed and replacing that with a fully accessible active travel and pedestrian bridge. So it's quite a simple concept, but it is quite a complex project when you look at all the intricate engineering details that have to go into it. Now, the principal reason for replacing the bridge is to allow the closure of the level crossing. The level crossing is, again, as I mentioned, it's a Victorian era infrastructure. It does create considerable traffic congestion within the town of Pencoed when that crossing is closed. And this has been a priority for the authority for some time, and the replacement bridge has also been a policy within the current development plan, previous development plans, and will be going forward into the replacement LDP. So it's been on the agenda for some time. Now, this is the closest we've actually got to getting any realistic funding to take this forward. And we've started the work on this prior to putting the LUF bid in. As Jeannie mentioned, we've gone through the first two stages of the well tag assessment process, which is a mandatory process where any transport project has to go through this assessment and look at various options. So we've gone through the first two stages of that, and we've also carried out consultation within the community. And the next stage now is to go on to start the detailed design process, so that there will be a preliminary design, and then there'll be full detailed design, and then we can start work on site, hopefully, if we get funding through. The matter is very complicated, because we are talking about putting infrastructure over the mainline railway line, and it's very, very difficult to do that. You can't close the railway line completely to do that, only on very certain times. So it's going to take a lot of planning and a lot of consultation with our partners at Network Rail. Now, Network Rail are fully on board with this project. They've been part of a working group that's been looking into this over the last couple of years, and that there is widespread support from Network Rail, from UK government, or the Wales office element of UK government. There's support from Cardiff Capital Region, from the Regional Transport Authority, local MPs in support, and also the local MS Senate member. So yes, it's it's a tricky project. It's classed as a major transport project in terms of the LUF funding. And that means that there's a considerably more information that's going to go into this than we would for a non-major transport project. The bid has gone in, that there's still a lot of outstanding information to go forward. Part of that is the economic argument, the economic benefits, the social benefits. We've got to do more work on that. And of course, as I mentioned, we've got to work on the design and get the full costing. Now, when we costed the project out a little while ago, estimates were coming in around about £20 million, but we have allowed for potential increasing costs over that time. So the bid has gone in at £25 million. But there's still considerable work to be done, a lot of work to be done on this project to take it to the next stage. There's a lot more consultation. There's a lot more design work, and we are in the process now of setting up the project board that will help deliver this project as and when we get the funding. A lot of the work on this is going to have to be outsourced. We haven't got the expertise in house to do that. We would need an expert company, a major engineering company to do this work for us. People that are experienced with dealing with railway projects. So it's we've got to get those people appointed. We need a tendering process for that, but we also got to get our own project team up and running as well. So a lot of work to be done, but the bid is in.
Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you for that, Jonathan. We have Councillor Nora Clark first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, another worthwhile project that's really, really needed. I think my question is going to be about the same as the one that I asked for the pavilion regarding funding, and I know Jonathan has touched on the funding. Obviously, if the 25 million isn't enough, although I know you're saying that you've put a £5 million contingency in there, it's not enough. Janine mentioned about a rethink on the pavilion. Obviously, if you're putting in a bridge, you can't cut back or, scale back or whatever if you haven't got enough money. You've got to carry on, of course. So really, that's my question is concern about the funding. And can I just ask, has this project got to be finished by 2025? It has.
Well, actually, in exceptional circumstances, they will allow a transport bid to go till 2026.
Right.
So what we have said to them is, as it stands, we've said we think it could be up to 25, and that it will be required until 2026. But when we finish the design, Councillor Clark, I mean, it could be significantly more than that bid, because at the moment we don't have a full and costed design. So if we find something in the ground, or there's a new building reg on bridges, bearing in mind it's a road bridge over a main railway line, and of course we have to make the bridge high enough for electrification of the line as well. That's something else they've asked us to do. So it's a very complex project. So I think, to be fair, there's quite a lot of unknowns here, and I wouldn't like to comment, will 25 be enough?
Could I ask, Janine, is there any other sources of funding that could be sourced for this project?
It would be, there won't be any within BCBC. That's going to be incredibly difficult, because we're having difficulty just completing our day-to-day business, Councillor Clark, you know that.
Yes.
Having been in a lot of the budget meetings, and we're having to make £6 million of savings this year itself. So what we will be heavily reliant on is on other partners and external agencies, for instance, Welsh Government. Welsh Government, Transport for Wales, CCR. All of those people play a part here, because bearing in mind that we really do think that there's a regional impact here of having all of this infrastructure in place. Good infrastructure in the borough does have a regional impact on the transport. So at this stage, we've submitted the bid. To be fair, they asked us for a fully designed bridge. And we said, well, we're not there, but they said, look, this is a project we've wanted you to submit for some time. Submit what you have, and what we've had to do is add an addendum, an annex that says what we would do next. So they've asked us for the bid plus an annex. So we're just waiting with bated breath to see where we get to. And then the next phase then, as Jonathan said, is to commission consultants, get a project board in place, and to move as quickly and swiftly as we can through the process. To be quite frank, the amount of work we've done in the last year is phenomenal. If it hadn't been for this bid, this would have taken much longer. These, transport projects, Councillor Clark, can take up to 10 years to gestate because of everything you have to consider. So John and his team have been wonderful to get it to this stage in such a short period of time. So I think it's eyes down really to see what is, if we do get this bid approved. I mean, it'd be absolutely fantastic. It's the most money we will ever have secured for a transport project in Bridgend. I mean, ever in the history of Bridgend. So yeah, we are very excited about it, but we're also very cautious. So you're right to ask that question. A cautious approach, I think we should say.
Okay, thank you both very much.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. Thank you. Next, Councillor Martin Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions, hopefully quite brief, points more than questions perhaps, but one thing Janine touched on there, and it was my first question. She almost stole it from me, but never mind. It was about the regional element, dimension to this. We are applying for 25 million, and I think I read in there our match funding, our contribution to that is 2.5. Well, it's nice having support from Welsh Government and Network Rail and the rest of it, but have they put their money where their mouth is? Because everything west of the bridge will benefit by the closure of the level crossing, and clearly there is very clearly a regional dimension there, and the is it TfL who have responsibility, or is it Network Rail? I do get confused, but they will benefit as a result of this. So have we approached them? Have they? Well, they're not going to offer, are they? But have they got anything to say about this, or have is there an opportunity there in the event that perhaps funding falls short? The other one is very, very specific and borders on NIMBYism, I guess. Completely support this project, as I think everyone in this committee seems to. The one thing that the level crossing does have is a moderating effect on the volume of traffic that uses the Hendra lanes and Coity as a rat run. It's a pretty sort of hairy place to, you wouldn't walk it, but it's certainly a pretty hairy place to drive, and the hamlet of Hendra in particular really suffers from heavy traffic. It does concern me slightly that the removal of the level crossing will make their pain worse, and also the pain of people in Coity village as well. So can I have an assurance that when the level crossing is removed, which it must be, I do support it, that there will be moves or things put in place to ensure that we don't have a terrible traffic problem through the lanes and make a bad situation worse.
Right, John, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, certainly. Regards to the regional dimension, TfW and Network Rail have been involved with the steering group that we've set up. They are fully in support. That there isn't any funding in Network Rail. There's no funding in TfW to take this type of project forward. However, we have had funding from CCR, which is why we've got as far as we actually have over the very short space of time. So Pemprisk Road Bridge is actually one of our metro projects, along with the Metrolink bus facility in Porthcawl. So the two projects we got going forward as metro are Pemprisk and Porthcawl. Well, that metro project is coming to an end now in 2023, so we're not being able to draw any more funding down for Pemprisk from that particular funding source. But we have had quite a lot of money to get the well tag work done and get the consultation done, and the some of the sketch drawings that we did as part of that consultation. So it has. If without the CCR funding, we couldn't have got to this point, and we couldn't have put the bid in. So there has been some funding there. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with CCR funding in the future, Welsh Government funding, local transport funding, what will come from that in the future, but we will certainly be keeping keeping the finger on the pulse of the funding programs as they come forward. And of course, as this project develops, and the more certainty that we get with this project, the more chance of us attracting additional funding through other means. So we've got to get work going. So it started off with small breadcrumbs and getting the initial feasibility work through WellTag. That funding has allowed us to develop the project to the point where we can at least get an LUF bid in, but there's still a lot more work to go forward. And once we've got to that sort of preliminary design stage, we are quite well down well down the line of getting this project started. So it's still a lot to be done, but I think I'm fairly confident that due to the sort of regional and national implications of removing level crossings on this main line, I think we got a good bit of capital behind us, good bit of support from all sectors, and hopefully that will translate into financial benefits going forward. So I think, I mean, the idea is that there's going to be more trains coming from the west, and that's going to happen whether the level crossing is there or not. What it does mean for Pencoy is that level crossing is going to be closed more than it's open if we're not careful. So we've got to act on it now. To turn to the second point, again, very valid point. At the moment, we are in a position where, yes, there's a bit of a throttle, there's a choke at that point, which may put off people from using the sort of highway network in the wider community. And at the moment, there's a moratorium on development west of the level crossing, which has been in place for some time. The removal of the level crossing, the replacement of the bridge would potentially allow more traffic into these areas, and maybe we could consider lifting that moratorium. However, we can't do that without taking into account the traffic impact on the surrounding area. So part of the work that we'll have to do as before we can lift any moratorium and before we can look at any future development proposal is to have a good idea of what the impact is going to be. Now, some of that we may not know until the new bridge is actually in, but it is something we are mindful of, and it is going to be a piece of work that will have to be attached to this project, is to look at because we're radically changing the highway structure in this location. We've got to look at what's going to happen around it, and it's not just on the Coity side, it'll be on the other side as well. We need to know what's going to happen in the event that this comes forward. But yeah, it's something we will have to take into account, and it's going to be a separate piece of work in itself.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williams, you happy with that?
Yeah, no, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Clark, could you put your hand down, please? And it's kind of going to bring in Councillor John Spanswick now, the cabinet member who's put his hand up to speak. John?
Thank you, Chair. Let's take that hand down as well. Yeah, and thanks, Jonathan and the team for very early stages with a lot of work to get this point. Let's hope there's a lot more work in the future if it's approved, and hopefully, that's not far off. And also, thanks for just briefly clarify then the city deal and the contribution that's made to this point to get us where we are. Because quite often we don't appreciate and don't recognise the city deal, the contributions coming back to help us improve the county borough, and that needs clarifying. You've done well there then. As far as the project, amazing. Jean mentioned the largest transportation project the county borough would have seen was approved. And also, I need to make a point. We've quite often been told off in the past, this is the 4th town of Bridgend. Many people think of Bridgend, Maesteg, Bwthcorp, but forget about Pencoed as another one of the towns. And if this project was to come off, I would hope, with the crossing being closed, we then have an opportunity for a new Pencoed town square, town centre square, and the enhancements that could bring, which would be a major boost to Pencoed. I think Councillor Martin might be right about the end lane, though. That, well, he is right. There's lots of traffic going through there. I've used it myself in the past just to save not waiting by that crossing. There may be, with the crossing removed and the transport infrastructure improved there, they will reduce maybe the traffic if it's easier to get out of Pencoed, but currently people will go through those lanes because of the problem getting out of Pencoed. And without even touching the area of traffic queuing, car engines running, even though there's stop-start these days, I try to think what's happening, the pollution levels at the moment, the traffic's just standing idle at that junction, at that crossing, sorry. So let's hope. I'm not sure, Jeannie, if we clarified when. I think it's before Christmas this year, we'll know, I think, and then soon, if the bid is approved, and then perhaps all members can have a further update and a briefing then on the timescales, because this is a massive project, and let's hope further money will come from City CCR, I'm sure, to make sure this succeeds.
Councillor Spanswick, it could be the best Christmas present ever if for BCBC, if they got the pavilion on this, it would be wonderful. We'll see.
Yeah, now we're talking. Yep.
Thank
Thanks,
you, John. Well, I've got no further hands up. Let me just check. Councillor Jenkins, your hand is up and down. Are you open to speak, Councillor Jenkins? No. His hand keeps coming up, raising.
Yes.
Here he is.
Yeah, it's up and down like me.
I know. Don't say nothing now. Just
well, I won't keep it long. I'd just like to say as well that I'm obviously very disappointed that they couldn't think of a scheme for the Ogmore constituency. You know, particularly my Steg, along with its sister valleys, the Ogmore and Garrow valleys. We have gone downhill significantly over the last 2 decades, particularly with the loss of employment, etc. More and more people are travelling out of the valley to go to work, so transport is a big issue. We've been promised a half-hourly service, etc., which has never materialised. New coaches, well, they weren't new in the first place. They were all rolling stock from somewhere else. So people were led to believe they were new, but no, they weren't going to be new anyway. Where the other parts of the country had new rolling stock, we were having the old ones. That hasn't materialised. So I myself have submitted a number of ideas for regenerating. I think 3.4 of the purpose of the report was stated that it is a local infrastructure capital project that has a visible impact on people, their communities. This includes a range of high-value local investment priorities, including local transport schemes, urban and economic regeneration projects, and supporting cultural assets. Well, we supported the cultural asset part of it. The rest of it has been left to go, and I'm sure we could have made a bid based around. Probably my plan has been lying in someone's drawer or even ripped up as it normally is, and that was based around.
I'm mindful of time here. Can you make headway with this comment and question?
Well,
if that's okay.
Basically, you said the director did mention that that it needed the backing of the MP. Well, in the report, it doesn't say that. It just says they would like to see the MP express an interest. So if we'd given him something to express, I'm sure he would have supported it. But it's not part of the, it's not a requirement. That's what the report says. And we could submit up to £50 million. So I won't labour on that now, because this has all gone in the past, and we've got to go now another 3-4 years or more, at least, or a couple of years to get the grant. But I certainly would hope, and if I'm around, I would ask the directors, if they're there as well, to consider both the Ogmore constituency in the next round of plans and funding for this particular, if it's still there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jenkins, and we all echo those comments. And I'm sure if you submit your ideas to Janine, she will consider them appropriately in the next round, Phil. Councillor Jenkins.
Chair, may I just
Janine?
respond to some? Can I respond to some of that,
yes,
please?
Of course you can. Yeah.
Just to make you aware, over the last 12 months, we put together 3 different schemes for the Ogmore constituency. We were desperate to try and get a scheme in for the left bid for that, but unfortunately, the left officers didn't like any of the 3 that we had put together. They didn't feel they fitted the left criteria, which was very disappointing. So we started off and we worked with Hugh Ranker-Davies on them all as well. We've had numerous meetings with him, Chris Elsmore. We've had meetings with all of the MPs involved. We started off with what we call an agri-hub in Pencode. And it was a replacement, dare I say, do you remember the Cowbridge livestock market that we used to have once upon a time? Well, now livestock is taken down to West Wales and or to Monmouth. There's nothing in our area, and that would really support the agricultural economy. And what that would be was, it wouldn't just be a livestock market, it would be an area where you could have small startup businesses, for instance, making organic cheeses and, or you name it, all that product. So a kind of like organic market agri-hub was what we put together.
I would echo that, yeah.
Yeah, it was a fantastic proposal. We had conversations with the colleagues at LEF. Because the site that we had picked was outside of Pencode, it wasn't directly connected to Pencode town centre itself. There were some land issues there, and I'm afraid we couldn't move on that scheme. It didn't really fit into any of the brackets with the left bid. Now, that's not to say we can't seek other funding and do it under other schemes. So we've still got an awful lot of work done on that piece. That's the first one. We then turned our attention to employment uses, and we thought, well, what else can we do? And Yayan and his team, Yayan's had to leave the call, unfortunately, but Yayan and his team looked at a series of small business startup units or small industrial units in the 3 of our valleys, and not just a unit, but to provide business support and wrap around support. So to help people start their business, help them do a business plan, set up their funding, do their taxes. So it wasn't just having a place to start your business, it was all the wraparound support and training. Now, we did an awful lot of work on that, got costings, we knew a lot about it. We sat down with the LEF officers and they basically said, no, Levelling Up does not support that type of employment use. You have to get other ways of funding it. Levelling Up is for town centre regen, it's for heritage and transport. Now, that was when I think we were most despondent, because we said, well, Levelling Up for the valleys is, I'm afraid, first and foremost about jobs, about employment, about economic development, job creation. And we were very, and that was when we said, well, can you now please consider looking at that in the future for any future rounds. And then the third scheme that we had started working on, bearing in mind now we had a deadline looming, the third scheme we started looking at was the Garrow Valley Railway. And could we do a tourism railway from, for instance, Bryngarrow House all the way up the valley? Could we combine it with Arwen? Could we do some work with that? There's a railway society that were very excited to get involved. But unfortunately, the level of detail that they required for that bid just wasn't in time and in place, because we'd worked on 2 other bids. So unfortunately, it wasn't that we couldn't get a bid over the line. We did 3 bids for Ogmore, but every time we put a bid in front of the officers at LEF, they said to us, no, we can't support it. Now, the MP supported it, and we as the council supported it, but I'm afraid we couldn't get those over the line. So we still have a LEF bid that we can submit for Ogmore, hoping in the next round of funding we'll be able to do a bit more work. They might review some of the criteria, and we want to put a fantastic bid in. Now, that doesn't mean that some of those things we've just talked about can't be brought forward in a different way, because what we might do is we might look at some shared prosperity fund and whether we can use any of that money to do feasibilities on some of these things we've talked about. So we haven't given up by all means. We've tried our damnedest to get a bid in, but unfortunately we didn't quite manage it. But it wasn't through lack of trying. So I just wanted to clarify that, Chair, because we were incredibly disappointed. Yayan and the team, having got onto the 3rd bid, could you imagine how disappointed they were? But we'll get some. Can I
ask a quick question, Janine? So when could this be resubmitted, and what sort of timescales we're talking about going forward then? Obviously,
well, the timescale for LEF is, as we said a little bit earlier, all these schemes have got to be finished by the 31st of March 25, right. And then LEF 2 starts.
So we can't, this wouldn't happen
No, this round will close. This round has closed. It closed when we submitted in August. So
Yeah.
what we are expecting is tail end of next year, early 2024, they'll open the next round for left. So it's only in about a year or so time. And then we'll have to work on projects and resubmit them
Right, okay. So
for the next round.
It is a few years then, whatever happens, it would be several years, wouldn't it? It's, the time everything was to
Well,
go through,
it's going to be 1 or 2 years, yeah, before the next round comes up. So, we'll have our hands full with delivering these projects, and then we'll have to turn our attention to Ogmore and go again. And of course, if they say to us, you can reapply for Bridgend and reapply for transport, well, we'll do that again as well.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, these are our best chance of significant capital funding. So.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I got Councillor Martin Williams. Is your hand up, or is that a legacy?
But it's still on. Apology. I'm apology for the lateness of time. It's a very engaging subject. This could turn into something for another time. But I'm asking very quickly what the lessons we've learned, because it seems to me that we're living in strange times, aren't we? And we had EU funding, and it seemed that we had a lot of stability about whether it was EU funding or other funding. We knew when it was coming, we knew what it looked like, we knew the sort of criteria, we knew the people. Yeah, so I think Ginny's nodding, and we're living in strange times. We didn't see this coming, and when it came, I guess we didn't know what the criteria would be. And there's a change of prime minister, and there's some novel things were done last week in the mini budget, and who knows what novel things will come in years to come. Is a lesson, and if this is in place, please forgive me. It's not a criticism. It's my lack of understanding, or perhaps our lack of clarity or communication. Is a lesson from all of this that BCBC need to get on the front foot. And we need to have a comprehensive strategic investment plan so that we have aspirations, and we have other things that are more than aspirations. We have almost microwave ready projects that when something strange comes along or an opportunity arises, we can say, right, we know in Ogmore we've got half a dozen projects that may or may not fit that. We may never be able to fund them, but sometimes funding will come along, and we have an ability to take it out of the fridge, stick it in the microwave, stick some garnish on, and that will then fit the need. Is that a lesson, or is that something we're already doing, but it's not obvious to me?
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Williams. You hit the nail on the head here. A couple of things to unpick for that. The short answer is yes, we're already doing it, but let me unpick it a little bit. I think the thing that was most difficult with levelling up was they announced it. They kind of announced the outline of it, but they never gave any detailed criteria or guidance. So they announced it. We were like, okay, kind of like the blind leading the blind. So we started working on all these different bits, and then in March, or end of March, early April, we kept saying, where's the guidance, where's the guidance? We then get a bit of guidance, and these had to be in July, and we're getting the guidance in April. Well, of course, by then we'd done 6 or 7 months work on these projects, so the guidance came very, very late. You're right. You're absolutely right. We didn't know the individuals involved. They're a new team. We didn't have the guidance for it. All we could go on is other schemes we've done before. And incidentally, the Communities Directorate, I have to admit, are outstanding at writing funding bids. I mean, over the last, I think it was 3 or 4 years, we've got 43 million in the door. Our capital programme for communities is over 54 million, and about 43 of that is grant funding. I mean, and Jonathan and his team, all the active travel stuff, and Dell and her team, and Yayan, they are superb at writing funding bids. So it's not through lack of writing them, but the clarity didn't come, which is very, very disappointing. So especially for the Ogmore bid, when they were saying to us, well, that doesn't meet the criteria. And when we were saying, well, give us the criteria in detail then, so we can understand. So that's a little bit frustrating. We're trying to build a relationship with them. We're having monthly meetings with them. We've taken them out on site and showed them everything. So we're trying our best to rebuild that. So so you're right in many ways. It was incredibly frustrating, a new initiative, and we did our best shot. And hopefully we'll get 2 out of the 3 funding. With regard to shovel-ready schemes, 100%. That is blue sky thinking. So what we have got is two big major documents that went through council in March. We got our 2030 strategy, and that's loaded up with projects, or at least the action plan will be. And then the second one that we've got is the economic development strategy that Yayan and the team worked on. And again, there's a significant amount of projects in there. Now, so we know what the projects are, and we know what we'd like to do. Are they worked up to REBA for? No, but at least we've got some detail and some political will behind it, and we know what it is we'd like to achieve. Now, I'd love to take these schemes one step forward and have them ready, but unfortunately, with the staff base that I've got currently, my team are flat out delivering what's in front of us. You know, I am struggling, to be honest with you, to deliver all the things we need to deliver this year. However, we have a much better idea, a clearer idea of our strategic direction now than ever. So I think a lot of the things you said there are very, very pertinent. And you know, and I'd like to think we'll hopefully be in a better position in the future to, you know, we've learned an awful lot from working with the UK government. I mean, on these schemes. Frustration, torture, you name it, we've learned it. But we will take those lessons, build that relationship, and hopefully we can move on with them. Okay. I hope that's answered some of your questions there, Councillor Williams.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You're trying to get an understanding, and that's what it's all about. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Thank you, Janine. Well, there's no more hands raised. There's no more questions. In other words, guys, so I think I'll thank the invitees for attending. And I would like to take the opportunity to congratulate Janine on the work they've done so far. We know it's work in progress, Janine. We know that, and all the hard work of all the staff. We'd like to pass out congratulations on to them, our thanks on to them. And you're free to leave the meeting unless you want to stick around.
No, thank you very much, Councillor. Let's fingers crossed now we get all these grants approved.
Yeah.
And it'll be wonderful for the borough. But we can come back and tell you all about that again.
And
right,
all the
thank you very
councillors
much,
100%
everyone.
behind you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair.
Good night.
Thank
you. Councillors and the cabinet members, of course. Thank you, John.
Cheers all.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Bye. Take care.
Okay. Right. We're on conclusions and recommendations in committee. So, Rachel, do you want to run through what we've heard and try to put it into some sort of context for us?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, what I'll basically do is I'll go through kind of summaries of discussions that was held, maybe raise some points that you may want to take forward, and then members can just come in as and when if they want to raise any points going forward. As I said before, the recommendations are to note, but you are free to make any comments, recommendations, etc. to put to the Cabinet or to the service area. So in relation to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund that was first discussed, members discussed the top slicing in relation to CCR, whether you wanted any further detail over any aspect of that, because there was mention over the net carbon zero and about detail of the appendix. So I wasn't sure whether any members wanted further detail over that. But if you do, please raise your hand and flag it.
Yeah, go on. Sorry,
yeah,
Rachel.
That's all right. No, there was also then talking about the presentation to town and community councils. What I thought was when that's made to the town and community council forum, I'll make sure a copy of that presentation then gets sent out to all members of this committee. So I've highlighted that. There was discussion then around funding allocations and tourism and more work to be done in that area. I don't know whether there's anything members wanted to raise on that aspect. In relation to funding allocations then further on about the poor return, I wondered whether members wanted to raise anything about further information on how claims and reporting processes will work, because there was talk about the legal agreements from RCT, so whether members wanted to receive any information about that. You know, it can be just outside the committee. We can request that as additional information if you want to get to understand how the actual accountability process for that is going to work. There was then discussion around delivery, and again I've highlighted whether there's additional information you want on the detail of projects. Requests maybe when available. I think they offered that up about individual funding and over the projects. And then in terms of confidence in delivering, there was detailed discussion around that. Then there was discussion around the output, and I have noted down about getting clarification for the committee in relation to whether there will be clawback on any of the fund. So I'll note that down and try and get that clarification for you. There was a proposal put forward, which I don't know whether members want to progress as anything formal in relation to writing to the MP at the actual the poor return and the poor funding. I think that was Councillor Davis, Colin Davis, that actually raised that one, and whether you wanted to make that into a formal recommendation that the officers actually write to the local MP and highlight about that. That's what I've got on that item. Is there anything members wanted to raise in relation further, please?
Anybody got anything? Colin, do you want to put that as a recommendation? What Rachel mentioned there? Right, go ahead, Colin.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. My point, I mean, you know, let's be honest now, personally, I you know, even though we are on a scrutiny committee, would he respond to it? Yeah, so, you know, I put that point to some of the councillors who asked those questions. You know, I'd support writing to him because it is a UK government fund. But you know, nobody came back to me in the meeting, so whether or not somebody wants to pursue that now, and you know, I'd support it. My other point is, in terms of, you know, I mentioned the community benefit aspect of the procurement contract for the pavilion, and I was thinking the same for the bridge. That may be small potatoes in terms of percentage of the overall bid, but it's still something that could, as John Spanswick alluded to, regarding the town centre in Pencoed, the benefits could be tremendous in terms of something like 25 million contract. So, but it made me think that perhaps, I don't know whether any other committee looks at Bridgen's procurement policy and how that works and how we can maximise it, because you could tie it in with 106. There's been loads of issues over the years in terms of us not really maximising the 106 benefits. So whether or not members think that if no other committee, certainly scrutiny committee, looks at this aspect, whether or not we could look at the overall procurement policy.
Would it be costs would look at procurement? I'm not sure. It's
Yes, possibly. I've got that all noted down actually under the second item in relation to the Section 106 funding. So I didn't know whether you wanted to relate it to the.
There was a point brought up around 106 recently in one of the meetings. I've had so many, you know, I'm blurring it to one, to be honest. That the lack of, you know, there was money sitting somewhere which hadn't been spent or something, or they hadn't got off the contract. There was something came up the other day. But anyway, so are we going to put this recommendation together, which Colin suggests, and to write to? That would be Jamie Wallace, would it?
They would.
You're talking about there, aren't you? Yeah, not Chris Elmore. He's a Bridgend MP, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, no. In terms of the Ogmore one, it would be Chris.
But
in terms of, as I say,
you brought that up and down the put call, didn't you? In the pavilion, didn't you?
I think the issues the members had, Chair, was with the actual process and the criteria. That was my understanding. You know,
yeah, it was the allocation on the. It was the allocation under the SPF, not the actual call. Because you got the SPF was the first item, and then the LUF.
Right.
So you
yeah.
got
Sorry. Yeah. You're right. Thanks.
So would you write to both MPs then? Would you, as a, or just the one?
Well, I mean, you know, as I say, it's UK government, so you know, and this is a Tory-led proposal, so it would be Jamie Wallace, but I'd be happy to write to both. Yeah.
The recommendation, Chair, is that, I mean, it's you can either look to write from the scrutiny committee, or you can recommend that, you know, the directorate look to, or the cabinet members look to write to them. It's entirely up to you. Which way do you want to take it?
I think the committee wants to do it.
Committee? Okay.
Yeah.
Chair, would it not be? I mean, there's a danger of being overtly political here, and I know we are politicians by nature, but not just by nature, we are politicians. But should we not be writing to the government and copying our MPs or the way? Because I don't know. I'm
not sure. Well, it was brought up to write to the MP. Was it in the meeting? Councillor Williams, was it speaking then? Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Sorry,
Yeah,
Chair.
yeah, it doesn't show because
No, if you were in a room where you'd know.
No.
It's if I may, Chair, has been done before in terms of writing directly to the MPs. It's been done before I've done it for Bridgend and I've done it for Cardiff before.
Yeah. I think write to the MPs, Martin. I'm going to make this executive decision on this one and write to the MPs and see what they come back with. We got one of each there, and we've got a mix, so it's non-political in a way. So let's see what they come back with and go from there. Okay. I got Councillor Nora Clark hand showing.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I put my hand up because I was just going to support right into the MP early on, but I also think that perhaps we should put something into the conclusions regarding I brought up today about is the money going to be enough, about the risk, the risk that there may be in these projects, in both of them actually, the LUF and the first one. I think we should make a note if the members are happy with that we are concerned about the risk.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, there was quite a lot of that, wasn't there? If we don't get the money, if we overspend, there was a lot of that all the way through it, wasn't there?
And the other thing that I am concerned about is actually spending the allocated funds within the specific time limit.
Yeah,
I know they were looking at perhaps asking for an extension, but if that doesn't come, then that money has to be spent.
Yeah. And as I said in the pre-meeting, it's eye-wateringly tight, this, isn't it? These timescales in council land are tiny, aren't they? Really, aren't they? You know what I mean?
I think we've got to look at we've got 5 months to the end of this financial year. In other words, they've only got another 2 years, and by the looks of it, Yayan, no, perhaps it wasn't Yayan, was mentioning about all the work that was needed to be done on the bridge going forward with consultation and tenders and goodness knows what. That's going to take an age.
I know, yeah. Well, she did say a capital project can take 10 years, she said, Janine said, didn't she?
Yes.
And you can squeeze it into 2 and a bit or 3, whatever it is,
Well, it's a huge project, the Prentice one.
Yeah, massive. Okay, thank you. So what was I forgot what your recommendation was, no, Laura? What?
I think Rachel was writing things down as I was saying them.
All right, okay, yeah, okay.
As long as people are happy with it, that's just my suggestion.
Yes, of course, yeah. Is everyone happy? What refresh your memories what it was, Rachel? Because I can remember.
I've just got expressing the committees that expressed concern regarding the risk involved for both the LUF and the SPF.
Yeah,
and
I think
the extension as well.
I think that's valid. The committee happy with that? Anybody against that? Speak up if you are. No? No, okay. So yeah, we'll go with that one then, not Rachel. I have Jonathan Pratt as number 1 now, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just on the, I know you've made an executive decision on this, but with my head on, I think it would be better off to contact the government directly. This is their project, their scheme. Obviously, copy both MPs into it. I mean, the way I see it is, if we're sending a letter to both our respective members of Parliament, we're asking them to lobby the government directly. I'm not sure whether either would have success with that. It would depend on their lobbying skills and influence within Parliament themselves, whereas we are a body within our own right. We can, of course, contact the government directly and copy both of our MPs into that. And if then they choose to lobby as well as alongside us as a borough council, I think that would be a better way forward than waiting for 2 MPs to lobby the government directly, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
okay,
I would second that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to be overruled on that one, and as long as the committee's happy, we'll go with that. I'm not precious about it. I've said before, I'm quite happy. Yeah, everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we are. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Richard, we'll amend that one then, please. Councillor Mary Williams, you back? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm back, second bite. What I'd like to do, I mean, what's come through all of this to me, and I don't know if the committee agrees, is we despite all the hard work that the officers have done, and it's undoubtedly they've worked really, really hard. I do wonder whether sometimes we're almost like busy fools, and Janine sort of agreed with my point that the blue sky future is that we have we have a strategic plan which is already in place, and then we have tiered below that areas of development, and then ultimately draft projects ready to go. And given that she sort of supported that view, I think we should note that she supports that, but I would like to see a plan of how we get there. That we maybe they come back in 3 months, 6 months to say, right, okay, we have to accept that the landscape's changed. We have to be more nimble. We have to be prepared to if funding suddenly comes in halfway through the year, we have to be prepared to have something to go with. And so I'm struggling to put this into words, but I think we should note, that they are moving in the right direction. But I would like to see what their plans are, and a bit more meat on the bones and what the future state would look like. Yeah.
Yeah, that's reasonable. I think, they can't have a detail, I suppose, because they wouldn't have the funding, how much they're going to get, etc. But they could definitely have some ideas, couldn't they, which they've sort of looked at. And yeah,
I think the problem is you end up being very, very busy. And that's why I said busy fools. I didn't mean that, unkindly, but you can be very, very busy. And actually that amount of effort put further up the chain would ultimately pay more dividends, perhaps. But I'd like to see what the future state would look like and how we get there.
Could I make an observation, Chair?
2 seconds. Phil, please. I'll bring you in next, Phil.
Yes.
Is the committee happy with Marty's suggestion there? We have to ask, in case people may object.
Yes, certainly.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Jenkins, go ahead.
Well, basically, this is my first set scrutiny meeting here in the protracted as summer it can be, and although the director put on a happy face here, she did allude on the problem, and I see that this county borough is not going to move forward unless we have the extra staff and expertise to be ready and capable of tackling these future funding bids, how they may change, etc., and to take on the Cardiff Regional Fund and the Welsh Government, because the staff, by the sound of the director and everybody else, are pushed to the limit now. And this is no reflection on their ability whatsoever. But I'm fearful that never mind what comes along, we won't be able to cope with it. And I think the Scrutiny Committee should make that observation, that we need to be prepared. Sometimes it is necessary to speculate, to accumulate. My fear, again, I will mention, is that we could well be losing out because we don't have the staff, like the Ogmore bids, etc. I know she said they didn't meet this kind of criteria, etc. But that's my observation, that we're being held back because we have the shortage of staff and expertise to move things more quickly forward.
Councillor Jenkins, you're not going to believe this. If you could read that, what I've written down on my bit of paper there, right? It says, I'll read it out to you. Projects, are they employing anyone? Was going to be my point.
Well, basically that's it.
That's the point, isn't it? You're making, it was. I felt that myself, that there's a lack of staff, isn't there? Of course, staff cost money, and are they allowed to employ staff to drive these projects forward? I'm not sure. Is that in the criteria again? We don't know, do we? But I agree with you 100%. It did seem like there was a staff problem, especially if we're delivering them going forward.
Becoming not fit for purpose in one sense is having to deliver things we can't deliver. Yeah. And well, just trying,
What also worried me when we were pulling people from elsewhere to deliver these projects. Well, Janine, I think it was Janine, did say that leaves shortages then in those departments where we know how bad each department is for staff as it is. So pulling people off them is counterproductive as well. So yeah, I'm definitely.
Well, I do my own bit of research into how other counties are managing for staff, or why there is a significant reason the Bridgend County Borough cannot get staff, even if they're advertising for them.
Well, that's the different. So you're going off on a bit of a tangent there, Councillor Jenkins.
Yes,
difficulty employing people.
Research on that.
Yeah, there is. That was also said, wasn't it, by Janine, the difficulty in employing people. But but I mean, you could still try to employ people, can't you? Even if it's difficult, But can they employ people to get these projects going and deliver? That's the question, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, well, everything's centered upon, like you written down there is timescales, etc., etc. And I would have thought that forward thinking would be that these things will have to be put in place. And if we're searching for funding, because funding sources are out there, come from various kinds of areas, you know, instead of being the government giving money centrally to the Welsh government and they farm it out, it seems to be you have to go fishing for it everywhere.
Yeah, well,
And we lose out. I know I'm broadening the debate, but the point is, I'm fearful that we don't have the expertise at hand now and the extra staff to cope with all these things that may well come our way.
Let me put that to the committee then, Councillor Jenkins. Are we happy to put that forward as would that be a recommendation? What would that be, Rachel, what are we looking at there?
Well, it would be an observation and a concern that for them to consider. Yeah.
Okay, Phil, let Rachel answer, Phil. What, Rachel?
Yeah, I've got it noted down, as Councillor Jenkins said, as a concern and an observation. You're certainly entitled to kind of highlight it as a priority going forward when you look at budgets, you know, in terms of when the budget round comes, that, you know, you can consider it as a priority, and that you can recommend that they consider the resourcing aspects priority going forward.
Yeah, okay. Especially with these funding bids, obviously, you know, to get them pushed through, isn't it? You know, and delivered as well, isn't it? You know, okay.
It takes a lady to put it more eloquently, doesn't it? You know.
Thank you, Phil. No, you made your point very well, Philip. No one's saying a word, mate. Very well done. Thank you. Hopefully it's the last one. No offence, Councillor Bledsoe.
Yeah, no. And it was possibly to try and finesse what Councillor Jenkins had put together. You know, my observation from that 3-hour meeting now is that the landscape in which this local authority applies for money is changing, and we need to make sure that as a local authority we are best prepared to move within those shifting sands of where this is going to come from. There's absolutely no doubt that, given the evidence that our officers have given us today, is that this round of funding up.
Oops. Councillor Bledsoe, you frozen and we can't hear you. Oh, what a shame. He's going well. I was enjoying that then.
He's well on it then.
He's dropped out. Oh well. I think hang on. Councillor Bledsoe, we missed 3 quarters of that, mate. If you kept talking, could you hear us?
No problems. Yeah, no, it's fine. It's just really that the one thing that came across to me listening to that long meeting was the landscape in which we are now having to apply for funding is changing, and we are being given the criteria in which to apply rather late, and that has led to a situation where we haven't been able to formalise a funding for an important part of our borough. You know, half of our borough is now going to miss an opportunity.
Yes.
And for me, trying to finesse perhaps, you know, the previous points is that we need to prepare as a local authority to be best prepared for these opportunities in any way we can. We need to be providing our departments with the necessary resources wherever possible to make sure that we are best placed to serve our residents. Because, you know, we can say what we want about the percentages that we've got, or being less than wherever, or however it's worked out. But to best serve our residents, this local authority has to put into place the infrastructure and provision to allow us to best apply for these kind of funds. And if that can be a recommendation going forward, then it's been a worthwhile 3 hours exercise in us as a local authority, understanding the new landscape of funding applications and how we have to best prepare and how we empower our officers to be in a position to do so on behalf of the residents. So I'd certainly support, you know, a kind of letter that comes around that.
Okay, like I said, it seemed to be a change from the European fund ending to a totally different system, which has caught us off guard. Let's be frank, you know, it appeared to be caught off guard by this, not through no fault of their own, and this has left us where we are today. So yeah, I agree with the comments. We all agree with those comments made by Councillor Bledsoe. Anybody objecting?
Yes.
Okay, righto. Okay, I think we've got to bring this to a close at some point. So I know it's not finished yet, but I think we're gonna have to move on. So, do you want to give us a quick
yes. So sorry.
synopsis of them, Rachel?
On the LUF, then on the on the next item. So again, I've got summaries in terms of discussions around funding and whether the funding be enough. And I've noted down Councillor Clark's comments on there because there were concerns on both sides of the LUF and the SPF. there were also discussions around the interim period when the pavilion closes, and then about that work being undertaken there. I don't know whether you just want to make a comment on that it seemed to be that the work was going on in terms of making sure they were looking at working with Arwen and making sure that there were facilities put in place in that interim period. So I don't know whether you wanted to put a recommendation on that or necessarily just say the committee strongly supports this work and possibly request some feedback in the future on what is being done for that interim period. Because I think there was particular emphasis on making sure that the Porthcawl isn't losing the footfall then in that interim period when the pavilion is closed.
I think predictably, Councillor Clark would like to say something.
Yes, if I could, thank you, Chair. Just come in on that, because although Janine did say that they were hoping that the town hall would be open and up and working in the spring, the feedback that I seem to be getting is that contractors are saying it's going to be a lot longer than that. So, you know, the concerns that were made by, I'm sorry, I can't remember the councillor that made them, but, you know, the concern about, you know, the town hall being ready and the pavilion closing, I'm becoming a little bit more concerned about that now because of, you know, the delays and the feedback really that is coming back from the contractors. Perhaps you know, Councillor Davis, a little bit more than I do, Chair.
I don't, but look at the building, I would say, you know, I'm not a builder of any description, but it doesn't look like it's going to be ready by early spring, but that's only my, you know, I've heard anything official, Nora, no?
Yes, no, well, I haven't heard anything official, but of course it does throw the pavilion programme right out of kilter, doesn't it? You know, if we've only got up to 2025 to actually do all the work.
In these narrow timescales, yeah.
It does, yes.
I know.
Quite concerning.
So what is your recommendation? What again? Nora?
I don't know, Rachel, what?
It's entirely up to the committee.
Basically the time frame, isn't it? You know, we're very concerned. I mean, we have to raise the point that we are concerned about the cultural, you know, and arts being basically all closed down within the borough.
Could we possibly put a question or recommendation to them, asking for a timescale of the Maesteg, you know, project? There's concerns that it's you know it's not going to be completed. Can we get something firmed up on
further
that? information? Yeah,
You know, I'll request further information, Chair, on the timescales of that.
Yeah, because we got concerns of that overrunning will impact on the starting then of the
availability, won't it? Yes.
Of the pavilion project.
And if I may, I don't want to jump in front of Jonathan, but just in case it's a different point. It's not just the availability or the lack of availability of a cultural facility. What does that mean for Arwen's revenue and Arwen's revenue and who will pick up the tab? Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to bring Councillor as a Porthcawl Councillor Pratt first, and then Councillor Walter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I obviously I asked about this during the meeting. Listening to Councillor Colin Davis, I actually like his idea about a temporary site somewhere. Wonder whether it'd be possible to. I don't want to insist that there's a temporary site. I don't want to burn money that we don't have, but whether a feasibility study can be undertaken to see whether a temporary facility can be created whilst the Grand Pavilion is out of commission. I mean, for several reasons. One, it would give one way to replacing the loss of the Grand Pavilion whilst it's being renovated, but would obviously, hopefully, benefit the county borough as a whole, not just Porthcawl. I'm not restricted to it being in Porthcawl either. We've got, you know, Kennelly not far away, 3 miles up the road. Have you lost me? Can you still hear me, councillors?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Sorry, I think I made a drop out then. Sorry, go on.
Okay, no, that's fine. So and I'm not tied to it being in Porthcawl. You know, we've other areas that we can use. But I was very interested to hear about Councillor Colin Davis's proposal and whether we should be looking for a feasibility study into that.
Yeah, okay.
If I may come back on that, Chair, I've just got noted down that I think Councillor Farr did say that there was actually work going on to look at a possible potential other venues, potentially marquees, other venues, etc. So what might be best is if we request some further information on this, with the recommendation that, you know, if needed, a feasibility study be undertaken to look into this.
Okay, you happy with that?
Happy with that.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Yeah, happy with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pratt. Thank you. Councillor Graham Walter, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to make the point, we've been going 3 hours now without a comfort break.
Yeah, I was going to call one. I know, I should have. I know.
For those of us who have some medical issues to deal with, it's not good. Perhaps we could defer. Perhaps we could defer the next item until the next meeting.
I have some important business I'd like to add to the forward work plan.
Well, can we? I know it's 7 o'clock. Can we take quick 5 minutes, literally quick 5 minutes then, just to, and then come back and finish that item off? Because I know Councillor Ian Williams did ask to speak on that item, didn't he? Maybe
just to let you know, Councillor Williams, I are half an hour late for a Bridgend Town Council meeting already.
I really need to add something to the forward work plan with the committee's permission. So I don't know if you can bring that in quickly.
Rachel, where are we now? What are we going to do here, Rachel?
It's entirely up to the committee, really, whether you wish to continue or whether you wish to have a comfort break. And as I said, you can pick up I can suggest some further areas for the final item. The forward work programme, if members have got areas they want to discuss or whether they would like to do it by email, again, it's entirely within committee's remit.
Right, what do you want to do, guys? I say I can stay all night. So I'm not in a rush. But do we want to break for 5 minutes, come back, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, break for 5 minutes, come back.
We'll come back. Is that all right, everybody?
Yeah.
We can do it justice then.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah.
Okay, 5 minutes. It's 1900 bang on now by me. So 7 o'clock, 7:05, we'll come back and we'll finish that off quick and get it done. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.